The forgotten secrets of the Colorado Rockies were never meant to be unearthed, not the clandestine military installations buried beneath innocent-looking cabins, not the radiation signatures that defied explanation, and certainly not the discovery that would have altered the balance of power during the Cold War's most dangerous years. This discovery forced a brilliant military engineer to fake his own death, pitted intelligence agencies against each other in the shadows, and now 70 years later has fallen into the hands of a desperate single mother who spent her last $1.200 on an abandoned cabin at a tax auction, hoping only to salvage a future for her 11-year-old daughter. What Sarah Lawson doesn't realize is that her dilapidated mountain retreat was once a classified Central Intelligence Agency monitoring station, and there's a reason it was designed to vanish from all official records for 7 decades. As the mountain winds whisper through the pines, they carry echoes of America's darkest secrets, secrets that powerful men would still kill to protect. The September sun beats down on the dusty mountain road as Sarah Lawson grips the steering wheel of her weathered 2008 Ford Escape. The SUV's air conditioning had stopped working months ago, but she barely notices the heat. Her mind is too preoccupied with the decision that would either save her family or become the final mistake in a series of unfortunate choices. Through the windshield smudged with the residue of mountain dust, she catches her first glimpse of the abandoned cabin perched on the edge of a forgotten mining claim in Clear Creek County, Colorado. The structure looks even more run down than the county auction photos had suggested, a small, weather-beaten wooden cabin with a sagging roof and windows that had long since surrendered their glass to winter storms and summer winds. At 38, Sarah never imagined herself as the owner of an abandoned mining cabin in the Colorado wilderness. Until 8 months ago, she had been a respected environmental compliance officer for a construction company in Denver, with a steady paycheck and a comfortable apartment where she raised her 11-year-old daughter, Emily. Someone who spent her days in climate-controlled offices reviewing environmental impact statements and ensuring building projects met federal regulations. But life had a habit of dismantling carefully constructed plans. The cabin had cost exactly $1.200 at yesterday's Clear Creek County tax auction, the precise amount remaining in her checking account, after 8 months of reduced hours followed by unexpected layoffs, when her company lost its major government contract. Sarah pulls the Escape to a stop on what had once been a gravel driveway, but was now mostly weeds and exposed dirt. The engine sputters ominously before going silent, a worrying sign that her transportation might soon join the growing list of things she could no longer afford to maintain. Through the driver's side window, she studies the property that is now incredibly hers. The official listing from the county had been brutally honest: historic Blackwater mining cabin built circa 1898, abandoned 1950s. Structure requires extensive renovation. No electrical service, no plumbing, no heating system. Buyer assumes all liability for structural integrity, environmental hazards, and geological stability concerns. Sale includes cabin outbuildings and 3.5 acres of mountainous property. What the listing hadn't mentioned, what Sarah had only discovered through 3 days of obsessive research at the Denver Public Library, was the mystery surrounding why a cabin that had housed 3 generations of moderately successful miners had been suddenly abandoned in 1952, right when geological surveys suggested the Blackwater claim might contain significant untapped deposits. The official county records she'd managed to access online showed conflicting information about the cabin's final years of operation. Some documents indicated it had been abandoned due to structural concerns and the declining profitability of small mining operations. Others suggested safety issues had necessitated its closure. A few references mentioned geological instabilities and restricted access zones, but the details were either missing or heavily redacted in the digitized archives. More puzzling was the ownership history. The cabin had been built in 1898 by the original claim owner, William Blackwater, and operated continuously until 1952, when it was suddenly transferred to private ownership, specifically to one Gerald Foster, a retired mining engineer with connections to the Bureau of Land Management. But Foster, according to county records, had died in a hiking accident in the Rocky Mountains in 1953, just 1 year after acquiring the cabin. The property had remained in the Foster estate ever since, with various heirs attempting to sell it for decades without success, until yesterday, when Sarah's desperate $1.200 bid had been the only offer submitted to the county tax assessor's office. Sarah steps out of the car, stretching her back after the long drive from Denver. Emily was staying with a friend's family until Sarah could determine whether the cabin was habitable. "It's a fresh start," she says aloud to herself, the words hanging in the mountain air. "It has to be." Stepping onto the wooden porch, the boards creak beneath her weight, but feel surprisingly solid. She tries the old brass doorknob, expecting resistance, but it turns with only minor protest. The door swings open and Sarah enters her new home. The interior is darker than she had anticipated, with most of the windows either boarded up or too grimy to admit much light. But as her eyes adjust, she begins to make out the layout of the space. The main floor appears to be a combination living area and kitchen. A stone fireplace dominates one wall, substantial enough to heat the entire cabin, and probably still functional if she could get a chimney sweep to this remote location. The air inside carries the expected mustiness of abandonment, but also something else, a metallic, almost clinical scent that seems out of place in an old mining cabin. Dust motes dance in the thin shafts of sunlight that manage to penetrate the grime-covered windows. Sarah moves deeper into the room, noting the quality of construction. Despite being abandoned for nearly 70 years, the interior shows less deterioration than she would have expected. There's no evidence of significant water damage, no signs of major structural failure. Even the furniture, though covered in dust, appears to be in remarkably good condition. It's as if someone had carefully prepared the cabin for a temporary absence, planning to return in a few months, rather than abandoning it permanently. Near the back of the main room, Sarah discovers a cast iron stove that appears to be in working condition, though it would require wood for fuel. A hand pump stands over a simple sink, suggesting access to a well or spring. "Water heat shelter," she murmurs, mentally calculating what it would take to make the place livable. "Better than a studio apartment I can't afford." As she continues exploring, Sarah notices something unusual about the bookshelf against the back wall. Unlike the other furniture, which is coated in an even layer of dust, several books on the middle shelf appear to have been disturbed relatively recently. She pulls one out, a technical manual on geological survey techniques dated 1948. Inside the cover, she finds a name written in precise angular handwriting, "Property of G. Foster, USAAF, Retain, Ph.D." Sarah leafs through the manual, noting detailed marginalia in the same handwriting, observations, and corrections that suggest intimate familiarity with advanced geological survey methods. What catches her attention, however, are the numerous references to radiation detection equipment and isotope analysis, unusual topics for standard mining operations. Placing the book back on the shelf, Sarah notices several others with similar technical subjects: a handbook on radiation safety procedures, a text on nuclear physics, and what appears to be a military field manual, with the cover partially obscured by dust. What kind of mining engineer needs this, she wonders aloud. Moving to what appears to be a small study area, Sarah discovers a desk with several drawers. The top one slides open easily, revealing neatly organized office supplies, pencils, paper clips, rubber bands, all vintage 1950s, but preserved as if they'd been placed there yesterday. The second drawer contains what appears to be a personal journal bound in worn leather. Sarah hesitates, feeling like an intruder, but her curiosity overcomes her reservation. She opens the journal to find the same precise handwriting from the books. The early entries describe Foster's acquisition of the property in straightforward terms: assessments of the cabin's condition plans for modifications, notes about water supply and structural reinforcement. But as she flips through the pages, the tone changes, becoming more technical and cryptic. Baseline readings established, control points mapped, anomalous signatures detected in Sector 4B, requires further investigation with enhanced equipment. Sarah frowns, the language reminiscent of scientific reports rather than a miner's journal. Further entries mention equipment installations, monitoring schedules, and communications protocols, all seemingly excessive for a simple mining operation. An entry dated October 17, 1952, stands out for its urgency. Confirmation received. Anomaly is consistent with theoretical models. Washington notified via secure channel. Awaiting instructions. Security protocols upgraded to level 3. The final entries become increasingly paranoid, with references to unwanted attention, surveillance concerns, and security breaches. The last dated entry, April 30th, 1953, just days before Foster's reported death, is particularly disturbing. Contact established with Sanderson. Contingency plan activated. All documentation secured per protocol. If you are reading this and I have not returned, proceed to First National Bank of Denver Box 1322. The key is where we discussed. The journal ends abruptly with several blank pages following the final entry. Sarah closes it thoughtfully, trying to make sense of Foster's cryptic notes. Whatever he had been doing here, it clearly wasn't conventional mining. As the afternoon light begins to fade, Sarah continues her exploration of the cabin. Behind the main living area, she discovers a small bedroom with a metal frame bed and a simple dresser. Like the rest of the cabin, the furniture is dusty, but in remarkably good condition. Adjacent to the bedroom is what appears to be a storage area filled with mining equipment tools and what look like scientific instruments covered in protective canvas. Everything is neatly arranged, covered in dust, but still in good condition. It looks like the workspace of someone methodical and precise, not the chaotic storage area of a cabin being hastily abandoned. Sarah examines one of the canvas-covered objects, carefully pulling back the protective covering to reveal what appears to be a Geiger counter, a vintage model from the early 1950s. Next to it sits what she recognizes as a spectrometer, another unusual piece of equipment for standard mining operations. "What were you looking for, Dr. Foster?" she murmurs. As she replaces the canvas, her hand brushes against what appears to be a simple wooden panel in the wall behind the equipment. To her surprise, the panel shifts slightly, suggesting it isn't as solidly attached as the surrounding wall. Curious, she examines the panel more closely and realizes it's actually a concealed door, designed to blend seamlessly with the cabin's interior walls. The mechanism is ingenious but simple, a hidden latch that releases when pressure is applied to a specific point. Sarah's heart races as she activates the latch. The door swings open to reveal a narrow staircase descending into darkness beneath the cabin. Rough-hewn wooden steps lead down into what appears to be a cellar or underground room. Using her phone's flashlight, Sarah peers into the darkness, her pulse quickening with a mixture of excitement and apprehension. The staircase is sturdily built, each step carved from a solid piece of pine and supported by robust framing. Despite their age, they feel solid underfoot as she cautiously begins to descend. The passage is narrow but tall enough that she doesn't need to duck her head, suggesting it had been designed for regular use rather than occasional access. At the bottom of the stairs, the passage opens into a small chamber that is unlike anything Sarah expected to find beneath a mining cabin. The room is clearly a laboratory or monitoring station, with walls lined with sophisticated equipment, much of it appearing military in origin. A large metal desk dominates the center of the room, its surface covered with maps, technical diagrams, and what appear to be logbooks. Above the desk, a large wall-mounted chart displays what looks like a topographic map of the surrounding mountains, with various locations marked with colored pins and annotated with alphanumeric codes. Along one wall stands a rack of electronic equipment, receivers, oscilloscopes, recording devices, all vintage 1950s technology, but clearly advanced for its time. Another wall holds what appears to be radiation monitoring equipment with dials and gauges connected to what must be external sensors. Most striking is a large metal cabinet marked with stenciled letters reading "Classified Umbra" and bearing the seal of the Central Intelligence Agency. Sarah stares at the CIA, marking her mind, struggling to process what she's seeing. This isn't a miner's cabin or even a geologist's field station. This is, or was, a covert government installation disguised as an abandoned mining cabin. With trembling hands, she approaches the classified cabinet. It's locked, but the key is in place as if Foster had left it accessible for someone who might follow him. Sarah hesitates, then turns the key. Inside, she finds neatly organized folders containing what appear to be technical reports, surveillance photographs, and communication logs. The top folder is labeled Operation Blackwatch, Progress Reports, and stamped with Top Secret, Eyes Only, in faded red ink. Sarah opens the folder to find a cover letter dated January 15, 1952, addressed to Dr. Gerald Foster, Umbra Field Operations, from Colonel James Harrington, Special Projects Division. The letter reads, "Dr. Foster, your detection of anomalous radiation signatures in the Clear Creek region has been verified by our technical division. The isotopic profile matches theoretical models for the phenomenon discussed in your December briefing. Given the national security implications, the director has authorized establishment of a permanent monitoring station under cover of mining operations. You will proceed immediately with installation of the equipment delivered to Denver last week. All communications will follow Umbra protocols via secure channels only. Local authorities have been informed that your presence relates to standard geological survey operations. Monthly reports are expected with immediate notification of any significant changes in the anomaly. Remember, the Soviets must not learn of this development under any circumstances. Sarah's hands tremble as she realizes the implications. Gerald Foster wasn't a mining engineer. He was a government scientist, likely with a background in nuclear physics, operating a covert monitoring station during the early years of the Cold War. As she continues examining the documents, the sound of tires on gravel outside the cabin jolts her back to the present. Someone has arrived, someone who has navigated the difficult access road to reach this isolated property. Sarah quickly returns the documents to the cabinet, locks it, and hurries up the stairs, closing the hidden door carefully behind her. She makes her way to the front window, just in time to see a gleaming black SUV pull up beside her weathered Escape. The contrast between the vehicles is striking. Her decade-old SUV, with its fading paint and mountain dust, versus the pristine luxury vehicle that suggests money and authority. A man steps out dressed in hiking boots, khaki pants, and a button-down shirt that somehow manages to look both casual and expensive. He appears to be in his early 50s, with salt and pepper hair and the confident posture of someone accustomed to being in charge. He studies the cabin with obvious interest before approaching the front door. Sarah takes a deep breath, trying to compose herself after the shocking discoveries of the past hour. The knock comes 3 sharp raps that suggest business rather than courtesy. Opening the door, Sarah finds herself face to face with the stranger, whose momentary expression of surprise suggests he hadn't expected to find anyone at the property. "I'm sorry to intrude," he says, his voice carrying the polished tone of education and authority. "I didn't realize anyone was here. My name is William Harrison. I'm with Atlas Resources." The name means nothing to Sarah, but the man's professional demeanor and obvious wealth suggest a corporate connection. "Sarah Lawson," she replies, automatically extending her hand. "I just purchased this property at the county auction." Harrison's surprise deepens, though he quickly masks it with a professional smile. "The county auction? I wasn't aware the property was being sold. Our company has been attempting to contact the Foster estate for several years regarding this parcel." Sarah feels a flutter of apprehension. If a company had been trying to acquire the property, there must be something valuable about it beyond its historical significance. "The property was seized for back taxes," she explains. "According to the county clerk, there hadn't been any contact with the Foster heirs for decades." Harrison nods, though his expression suggests this information is unexpected. "May I ask what you plan to do with the property, Ms. Lawson? This is a rather isolated location, and the cabin appears to need significant work." The question seems innocent enough, but Sarah senses an underlying tension in Harrison's manner. He's too interested in her plans for this to be casual curiosity. "I'm still figuring that out," she says carefully. "For now, I'm just exploring the property and assessing what I've purchased." Harrison reaches into his jacket and produces a business card. Atlas Resources specializes in historical mining, property assessment, and redevelopment. If you're interested in selling, we'd be prepared to make a very generous offer, significantly above what you paid at auction. Sarah takes the card, noting the company logo that features a stylized mountain peak. "I've only owned this place for about 2 hours, Mr. Harrison. I'm not ready to consider selling just yet." "Of course," he says smoothly. "But when you've had time to evaluate the challenges of maintaining a property like this, no utilities, difficult access, substantial renovation costs, you might find our offer appealing. We're prepared to pay well above market value due to the historical significance of the Blackwater claim." Sarah's instincts, honed by years of reviewing environmental compliance documents, where the real concerns were often hidden between lines of technical language, tell her that Harrison isn't being entirely forthcoming. His interest seems too keen, his arrival too coincidental. "How did you know I was here?" she asked directly. "This property is miles from the main road, and I only purchased it yesterday." Harrison hesitates just long enough for Sarah to know her question had hit a nerve. "We monitor county property records for historical mining claims. Part of our business involves acquiring and restoring significant sites. When we saw the transfer, I decided to visit the property to assess its condition." The explanation is plausible but doesn't quite ring true. County records weren't typically updated that quickly, and even if they were, Harrison's immediate visit to such a remote location suggests an urgency that contradicts his casual manner. I appreciate your interest, Mr. Harrison, but as I said, I'm not considering selling at this time. The cabin has personal significance for me. The lie comes easily fueled by her growing suspicion that there is more to this property than a dilapidated cabin in an abandoned mine. Harrison's expression hardened slightly before returning to its professional smoothness. Of course, but please keep my card. Our offer will remain open, and I think you'll find it quite generous once you've had time to consider the realities of this property. As he turns to leave, he pauses, looking back at Sarah with an expression that seems almost concerned. You should be careful here, Ms. Lawson. These old mining properties can be dangerous structural issues, abandoned equipment, even air quality concerns in enclosed spaces. Atlas would be happy to arrange a professional safety assessment at no cost to you. The offer sounds helpful, but Sarah can't shake the feeling that Harrison's concern is less about her safety and more about gaining access to the property. Thank you, but I'll arrange my own inspections. She watches as Harrison returns to his SUV, noting how he scans the property with careful attention before driving away. His visit has left her with more questions than answers, and a growing certainty that her impulsive purchase might have more value and potentially more danger than she had initially realized. Once Harrison's vehicle disappears down the mountain road, Sarah returns to the hidden staircase, descending once again into the underground chamber. This time, with the immediate pressure of Harrison's visit removed, she can examine the facility more carefully. The monitoring equipment along the walls is clearly designed to detect and analyze radiation, sophisticated technology for the early 1950s, suggesting significant government investment. The maps on the central desk show the surrounding mountains with overlaid grids and notation points that must represent sensor locations or sampling sites. Sarah opens another folder from the classified cabinet, this one labeled Blackwatch Initial Findings. Inside is a detailed report that begins to clarify the nature of Foster's work. Following detection of anomalous radiation signatures in the Clear Creek watershed, first reported by AEC Mobile Monitoring Unit, August 1951, comprehensive survey operations were initiated under cover of standard geological assessment. Initial findings confirm presence of unusually high concentrations of U-235 in geological formations not consistent with natural uranium deposits. Isotopic ratios suggest artificial enrichment process, or previously undocumented natural phenomenon. Of particular concern is the proximity to Site Delta, see attached map grid reference 12G, where preliminary testing for Operation Crossroads was conducted in 1946-47. Contamination from these activities was officially ruled out in 1949, but new evidence suggests possible underground migration of materials or unforeseen geological concentration mechanisms. The strategic implications cannot be overstated. If hostile powers were to discover this deposit, they could potentially bypass significant portions of the uranium enrichment process, dramatically accelerating weapons development timelines. The report continues with technical details about radiation levels, geological formations, and security protocols, much of it beyond Sarah's understanding despite her environmental background. What is clear, however, is that Foster had discovered something of profound national security importance, a deposit of weapons-grade uranium created through some combination of early nuclear testing and unique geological conditions. As Sarah continues reading through the documents, a more complete picture emerges. The U.S. government had conducted classified nuclear material testing in this region during the immediate post-war period tests that were officially minor and contained, but which apparently had unforeseen consequences. Foster, with his background in nuclear physics and military service, had been sent to investigate anomalous radiation readings and had discovered something nobody expected, a natural concentration of weapons-grade uranium created by the interaction of test materials with the unique geology of the Colorado Mountains. The national security implications would have been enormous during the early Cold War, when both the United States and Soviet Union were racing to build nuclear arsenals. A deposit of naturally enriched uranium would have represented a strategic resource of incalculable value and a target for Soviet intelligence. Sarah's attention is drawn to a leather-bound journal similar to the one she found upstairs but more detailed and technical. This appears to be Foster's official project log with daily entries documenting his findings and activities. The early entries focus on equipment installation and baseline measurements. But as months pass, Foster's notes reveal growing excitement about the significance of his discovery. March 15, 1952. Samples from Sector 8 confirm initial hypothesis. The uranium concentration exceeds 62% U-235, far beyond any natural formation previously documented. This isn't merely enriched ore, it's weapons-grade material requiring minimal additional processing. Washington is skeptical, demanding additional verification. April 3, 1952. Verification team arrived today. Their initial disbelief quickly turned to concern as their equipment confirmed my readings. Colonel Harrington personally apologized for questioning my findings. They're bringing in additional security measures disguised as environmental remediation teams. As Sarah reads further, the entries take a darker turn. August 12, 1952. Surveillance detected on the North Ridge. Unknown individuals with photographic equipment reported to Denver Station, but response was concerning. They suggested maintaining normal operations despite the security breach. September 30, 1952, second security incident. Vehicle followed me from Pine Creek. When confronted, driver claimed to be lost tourist. Vehicle had government plates with partial obscurement. October 24, 1952, received visit from individuals claiming to represent Department of Interior. Credentials appeared authentic, but behavior was suspicious. They asked pointed questions about my research methods and seemed particularly interested in sampling locations. Did not disclose classified information, but they clearly knew more than they should. The entries grow increasingly paranoid until December 1952, when Foster's tone changes dramatically. December 18, 1952. Meeting with Sanderson confirmed my suspicions. There is a faction within the agency that wants to develop this site outside official channels. Parallel program, no oversight, no accountability. The implications are horrifying. Cannot trust secure channels. Alternative communication methods established. January 5, 1953. Surveillance is now constant. They're not even trying to hide it anymore. Harrington is compromised or complicit. Cannot risk direct confrontation. Contingency plan in development. The final entries detail Foster's contingency plan, an elaborate scheme to fake his death, conceal his discoveries, and ensure that the uranium deposit couldn't be exploited without proper oversight. April 28, 1953. All preparations complete. Documentation secured in multiple locations. Legal framework established through Sanderson's contacts. Property will remain in legal limbo until conditions are met for proper transfer. Trust mechanism designed to activate only when suitable candidate emerges. April 30th, 1953. If you are reading this, then you have demonstrated the resourcefulness and integrity necessary to be entrusted with what follows. The deposit must not fall into the wrong hands, either foreign or domestic. Complete documentation is secured at First National Bank of Denver Box 1322. The key is in the false bottom of the specimen case labeled Blackwater Quartz Samples in the geology cabinet upstairs. Sarah's hands tremble as she processes the implications. Foster hadn't died in a hiking accident. He had staged his death to protect his discovery from being exploited by rogue elements within the U.S. government itself. And he had created an elaborate legal mechanism to ensure the property would remain inaccessible until someone with the right qualities, someone like her, discovered the truth. The sound of a vehicle on the access road jolts Sarah from her reading. Harrison returning, or someone else with interest in the property. She quickly returns the documents to their folders, closes the cabinet, and ascends the stairs, securing the hidden door behind her. Moving to the front window, she sees not Harrison's black SUV, but a more modest Jeep Cherokee with county markings on the door. A woman in her early 60s emerges dressed in sturdy outdoor clothing and hiking boots that show signs of regular use on mountain trails. "Ms. Lawson," the woman calls as she approaches the cabin. "I'm Linda Reynolds, Clear Creek County Assessor's Office. I wanted to check how you're settling in and see if you have any questions about the property." Sarah hesitates, unsure how much to reveal about her discoveries. The county official seems genuinely concerned, But after Harrison's suspicious interest in the documents revealing government surveillance of Foster, she has become wary of anyone showing interest in the property. "That's very thoughtful," she says cautiously. "I wasn't expecting a follow-up visit." Reynolds smiles, the expression crinkling the weathered skin around her eyes in a way that suggests decades of outdoor living. "We don't usually do this for tax auction properties, but given the remote location and the condition of the cabin, I was concerned. This is pretty isolated country for someone not familiar with mountain living." Sarah invites her in, having quickly hidden Foster's journal in her backpack before opening the door. The county official glances around the cabin with an appraising eye that suggests familiarity with historic structures. "The basic construction is actually quite sound," Reynolds notes. "These old mining cabins were built to last. With some basic repairs to the roof and a good heating system, this could be quite comfortable." "That's what I'm hoping," Sarah replies. "It's a bit of a project, but it has potential." Reynolds nods, but her expression turns more serious. "Mrs. Lawson, I hope you don't mind my asking, but are you aware of the history of this property? The circumstances of Gerald Foster's ownership?" The question sets off warning bells in Sarah's mind. Is this another person with hidden interest in what lies beneath the cabin? "I know he bought it in 1952 and reportedly died in a hiking accident the following year," she says carefully. "The property has been in his estate ever since." Reynolds sighs, sitting down on one of the dust-covered chairs without apparent concern for her clothing. "That's the official record, yes. But there's been folklore about this place for decades. Local stories about Foster and what he might have found up here." "What kind of stories?" Sarah asks, trying to keep her tone casual despite her intense interest. "Foster was a respected physicist with government connections. He came up here supposedly to assess the Blackwater mine for potential reclamation, but he ended up buying the property himself. Very unusual for someone in his position." Reynolds looks out the window toward the mountains, her expression thoughtful. "After his supposed death, there were rumors. Some said he'd found something dangerous in the old mine and had been forced into hiding by powerful interests. Others claimed he'd discovered something else entirely. Government secrets buried in the mine during the war years maybe are evidence of unusual geological formations that had national security implications." Sarah feels a chill despite the afternoon warmth. Foster's journal had mentioned rogue elements within the government but hadn't specified their exact motivations. "Do you believe any of those stories?" she asks. The older woman shrugs. "I've been with the county assessor's office for 35 years. During that time, we've had at least 6 serious attempts to purchase this property, offers well above market value from mining companies, private investors, even government agencies. All of them were blocked by peculiarities in Foster's will and estate provisions that effectively prevented the sale." She fixes Sarah with a direct gaze. "Then suddenly, after decades of legal gridlock, the property becomes available through a tax auction with minimal public notice, and you happen to be the only bidder. Doesn't that strike you as unusual?" Sarah feels exposed, as if Reynolds could somehow see through her casual demeanor to the discoveries she had made and the journal hidden in her backpack. "Are you suggesting there was something improper about the auction?" she asked defensively. "Not improper, no," Reynolds replies. "Everything was legally correct but convenient. Perhaps for someone who might want the property to pass quietly to a buyer who appeared to have no connection to the historical interests." The implication is clear. Reynolds suspects that Sarah's presence at the auction hadn't been coincidental, that she might be a front for one of the interests that had been trying to acquire the property for decades. "I assure you, Miss Reynolds, my interest in this property was entirely based on my personal circumstances. I needed affordable housing after losing my job in Denver, and this was within my extremely limited budget." The truth of this statement gives Sarah's voice a conviction that seems to register with the county official. Reynolds studies her for a moment, then nods slowly. "I believe you, Miss Lawson, but that doesn't mean you haven't stumbled into something complicated. This property has a history of attracting attention, not all of it benign." She stands, moving to the window to look out at the surrounding forest. "Just yesterday, after the auction records were processed, we had inquiries about this parcel from 3 different sources: Atlas Resources, a Denver law firm representing unnamed clients, and a federal agency that claimed to be conducting an environmental assessment of historic mining claims." Sarah's pulse quickens. "Atlas Resources sent a representative out here yesterday, a man named Harrison. He offered to buy the property for well above market value just hours after I acquired it. Reynolds turns back to her expression grave. William Harrison has been trying to acquire this property for Atlas for at least 5 years. Every time the legal obstacles seemed close to resolution, something would happen to restart the process. A previously unknown heir would emerge, a technical issue with the title would surface, or a government agency would file an environmental concern that required assessment. What does Atlas want with an abandoned mining cabin? Sarah asks, though she now knows the answer all too well. Officially, they specialize in redeveloping historic mining properties, turning them into luxury retreats or private museums that celebrate Colorado's mining heritage. But they're also known for reopening selected mines when geological surveys suggest untapped potential. Reynolds' tone makes it clear she suspects Atlas's interest goes well beyond historical preservation. Ms. Lawson, I don't know what's on this property that makes it so attractive to companies like Atlas, but I've worked for the county long enough to recognize when something doesn't quite add up. If you found anything unusual here, you might want to secure proper legal advice before proceeding. The warning is delivered with genuine concern, making Sarah think that perhaps Reynolds could be a potential ally rather than another person with hidden motives. Thank you for the advice, she says. I'm still exploring the property and assessing what I've purchased. Reynolds nods, apparently satisfied with this response. My office can provide information about grants for historic preservation if you're interested in restoring the cabin. And if you have questions about the property's history or legal status, feel free to contact me directly. She hands Sarah a business card with both office and personal contact information. As she turns to leave, she pauses at the door. One more thing, Ms. Lawson. Foster wasn't just any government scientist. Before he came here, he worked on the Manhattan Project, one of the junior physicists under Oppenheimer. And before that, he was a pilot with the Royal Air Force during the Battle of Britain, an American volunteer before Pearl Harbor. Whatever brought him to this cabin, he was a man who understood both duty and sacrifice. With that parting information, Reynolds departs, leaving Sarah with a new perspective on Gerald Foster. Not just a government scientist hiding a strategic resource, but a man with a history of service and sacrifice who had made difficult choices based on principle. After Reynolds leaves, Sarah sits on the cabin's front step, watching the late afternoon sunlight cast long shadows across the clearing. The day's discoveries have transformed her understanding of her impulsive purchase. What had begun as a desperate gamble for affordable housing had become something far more significant and potentially dangerous. Foster's hidden monitoring station and the uranium deposit it was established to study represent both an opportunity and a threat. An opportunity to solve her financial problems if she can establish legal rights to the mineral deposit, but also a threat given the powerful interests that appear to be circling the property decades after Foster's disappearance. Sarah needs to find the key Foster mentioned, the one hidden in the specimen case labeled Blackwater Quartz Samples, and access the safe deposit box in Denver to understand the full scope of what Foster had discovered and the legal protections he had established. Returning to the cabin, she searches the geology cabinet Foster mentioned in his journal. Among various rock samples and geological specimens, she finds the case labeled Blackwater Quartz Samples. The case contains several quartz specimens, each carefully labeled with location coordinates and dates. But when she presses on the bottom of the case, she discovers that it gives, slightly revealing, a hidden compartment. Inside is a small brass key attached to a numbered tag 1322 and a sealed envelope addressed simply to the finder. The envelope contains a letter written in Foster's precise handwriting. To whoever has discovered this letter, if you are reading this, you have demonstrated the curiosity, intelligence, and determination necessary to uncover what I have so carefully concealed. What I discovered beneath the Blackwater claim in 1952 was not gold or silver, but something far more valuable and dangerous, a geological anomaly resulting from classified military testing conducted in this region between 1946 and 1947. Through a process I still don't fully understand, nuclear material from these tests interacted with the unique geological formations in these mountains to create a deposit of uranium with an enrichment level approaching weapons grade. In normal circumstances, uranium must undergo extensive processing to reach the concentration of U-235 necessary for weapons development. This deposit, however, contains uranium already enriched to a level that would allow hostile powers to bypass significant portions of this process, dramatically accelerating weapons production. When I reported this discovery through official channels, I initially received appropriate response, increased security, scientific verification, strategic assessment. However, I soon discovered that certain elements within our government saw this not as a security concern to be managed, but as an opportunity to be exploited outside official oversight. These individuals, operating within the intelligence community, but without proper authorization, plan to develop this resource, secretly bypassing the safeguards and international agreements that govern our nuclear program. Their intent, as I understood it, was to create a parallel weapons development track answerable only to themselves. I could not in good conscience allow this to happen. The lessons of the Manhattan Project weigh heavily on those of us who contributed to it, and the prospect of nuclear weapons being developed without proper civilian and military oversight was and remains unacceptable. My death in 1953 was staged to allow me to disappear while ensuring the property and its secrets would remain secure. I established legal mechanisms designed to prevent any sale or development of the property until someone with the proper qualities could discover the truth, someone like you. The enclosed key opens safe deposit box 1322 at First National Bank in Denver. There you will find 1. Complete geological surveys documenting the extent and nature of the uranium deposit. 2. Legal documentation establishing clear title to both the property and its mineral rights. Evidence of the attempts to illegally seize control of the discovery. A trust document that will activate upon your presentation of this letter, providing financial resources to secure and properly manage the site. Whatever you decide to do with this information, proceed with caution. The interests that forced me into hiding in 1953 likely still exist in some form, and my systems for monitoring inquiries about the property suggest periodic attempts to locate my discovery continue to this day. The cabin contains additional security features not immediately apparent. The monitoring equipment in the underground chamber remains functional drawing power from a system I designed to operate without external utilities. It will alert you to any attempts to approach the property using radiation detection equipment. You now face a choice similar to mine. The deposit is valuable enough to attract significant attention if publicly revealed. Development would require substantial investment and would undoubtedly attract the same kinds of interest that threatened my operations 70 years ago. However, with proper legal protection and careful planning, the site could be secured and managed responsibly, either through controlled development or permanent containment. Whatever you decide, I wish you better fortune than I experienced. The Blackwater claim represents not just strategic resources, but a profound responsibility to ensure these materials never fall into the wrong hands, foreign or domestic. Sincerely, Gerald Foster, Ph.D., former Major USAAF, April 30th, 1953. Sarah's hands tremble as she rereads Foster's letter. The implications are even more significant than she had initially realized. Not just a uranium deposit, but weapons-grade material created through some unforeseen interaction between early nuclear tests and the local geology. And Foster hadn't merely been hiding from foreign agents, but from rogue elements within the U.S. government itself, people who wanted to create an unauthorized nuclear weapons program outside proper oversight channels. Sarah carefully places the letter and key in her pocket, then returns to the underground chamber to re-examine the monitoring equipment Foster mentioned. As she studies the control panels, she notices a small green light on one of the devices, proof that Foster's self-sustaining power system is still functioning after 7 decades. A logbook beside the monitoring station contains instructions for operating the detection grid, which apparently covers a 3-mile radius around the cabin. According to Foster's notes, any radiation detection equipment entering this perimeter would trigger an alert system, a security measure designed to warn of sophisticated attempts to locate the uranium deposit. As Sarah explores the equipment, a soft beeping sound suddenly emanates from one of the monitors. A small screen flickers to life, displaying what appears to be a topographic map of the surrounding area, with a pulsing dot moving along the access road toward the cabin. Someone is approaching someone carrying radiation detection equipment. Sarah quickly ascends the stairs, securing the hidden door behind her. Through the front window, she sees a black government-issue SUV making its way up the access road, not Harrison's vehicle, but something more official-looking. Heart-pounding, she watches as the SUV parks in the clearing. 2 men emerge, one in his 50s, wearing a suit despite the mountain setting, the other younger and dressed in technical field gear carrying what appears to be sophisticated monitoring equipment. The older man surveys the cabin with a professional's eye, while the younger one consults the equipment in his hands, adjusting settings and frowning at the readings. They confer briefly before approaching the cabin door. Sarah takes a deep breath, tucking Foster's letter deeper into her pocket. Her impulsive purchase of an abandoned cabin has plunged her into a 7-decade-old Cold War mystery, one that powerful interests are still trying to uncover. As the knock comes at the door, Sarah realizes she has a decision to make. She can reveal what she's found and potentially lose control of Foster's discovery, or she can play ignorant and buy time to access the safe deposit box and understand the full scope of what she stumbled into. The men knock again, more insistently this time. Sarah moves to the door, her mind racing. "Just a moment," she calls, buying seconds to compose herself. She opens the door to find the older man already holding out credentials. "Ms. Lawson, I'm Agent Thomas Reynolds, Department of Energy Office of Secure Transportation. This is Dr. Keller, our technical specialist. We're conducting a routine assessment of former mining sites in this region as part of an environmental monitoring program." The credentials look authentic, but Foster's warnings echo in Sarah's mind. Is this legitimate government oversight, or the modern equivalent of the rogue elements Foster had fled? "Environmental monitoring?" Sarah asks, feigning confusion. "I just bought this place yesterday." "Yes, we're aware of the recent ownership transfer," Reynolds replies smoothly. "Our program involves periodic assessment of all historic mining sites in the Colorado Front Range, regardless of ownership status. We're particularly interested in testing for residual contamination from early extraction methods." Dr. Keller lifts his equipment slightly. "This is a standard radiation detection package. Mining operations in this era often used radium-containing materials that can leave persistent contamination." The explanation sounds plausible, but Sarah notices Keller's equipment is far more sophisticated than would be needed for routine environmental monitoring. And Reynolds' demeanor carries the same controlled intensity she had sensed in Harrison. "I'm sorry, but I'd like to see more detailed identification and documentation for this inspection," Sarah says, channeling her experience as an environmental compliance officer. "As the property owner, I should have received advance notice of any government assessment." Reynolds' expression tightens slightly. "Of course, our office should have sent notification." He produces additional documentation from his briefcase, official-looking papers with Department of Energy letterhead detailing the environmental monitoring program. "We can reschedule if you prefer," he offers, though his tone suggests reluctance. "However, since we're already here with the equipment calibrated specifically for this elevation and geology, it would be more efficient to complete the assessment today. It should take less than an hour." Sarah studies the documents, buying time to think. If she refuses, she risks escalating their suspicions. If she agrees, she might learn more about what they're really looking for. "I can allow a limited assessment of the exterior property," she says finally. "But the cabin interior is off limits without proper advance notification and my attorney present. I'm still evaluating structural integrity, and there are liability concerns." Reynolds and Keller exchange glances. "The exterior will be sufficient for initial readings," Reynolds concedes. "We can schedule a follow-up for interior assessment with proper notification." Sarah nods, stepping outside to observe their work. Keller begins methodically moving around the property perimeter with his equipment, which emits occasional soft beeps as he takes readings. Reynolds remains closer to Sarah, asking seemingly casual questions about her purchase of the property and her plans for renovation. "Have you explored the old mine entrance yet?" he inquires, gesturing toward the visible mineshaft entrance, about a quarter-mile from the cabin. "No," Sarah replies honestly. "I'm not planning to go near it until I've had a proper safety assessment done." "Wise decision." Reynolds nods. "These old shafts can be extremely dangerous. Structural collapse, poisonous gases, flooding, all common hazards." As they talk, Sarah notices Keller's movements becoming more focused. Rather than the random sampling pattern of a general environmental survey, he appears to be following a specific path, taking more frequent readings as he approaches the area of the cabin beneath which Foster's hidden chamber is located. "Your colleague seems particularly interested in that area," Sarah observes, trying to keep her tone casual. Reynolds glances at Keller, then back to Sarah. "Standard grid pattern for comprehensive coverage, We've found that methodical assessment provides more reliable data than random sampling. Before Sarah can respond, her phone rings a welcome interruption. She steps away to answer, seeing it's a call from Emily's friend's mother checking on her progress with the cabin. It's livable but needs work, Sarah explains, keeping her voice low. I should be able to bring Emily out in a few days once I've got the basic utilities sorted. As she's speaking, she notices Keller has moved to the area directly above the hidden chamber, his equipment now emitting more frequent signals. Reynolds watches him intently, their earlier pretense of casual environmental monitoring slipping as Keller's excitement becomes evident. I'll call you back, Sarah tells the caller, ending the conversation to return to the agents. By the time she reaches them, Keller is showing Reynolds something on his equipment display, both men speaking in hushed, urgent tones. They fall silent as Sarah approaches. Finding anything interesting, she asks. Just background readings, Reynolds replies smoothly, consistent with the geological formation in this region. But Sarah can see the tension in his posture, the way his eyes keep returning to the area where Keller was getting stronger signals. These men aren't conducting a routine environmental assessment. They're hunting for Foster's uranium deposit. Doctor, Keller, your equipment seems quite sophisticated for standard environmental monitoring, Sarah observes. More like what we'd use for prospecting or specialized detection. Keller looks startled at her knowledge, but Reynolds steps in smoothly. Ms. Lawson, I understand you have a background in environmental compliance. The equipment is multi-purpose, designed to detect various potential contaminants, including naturally occurring radioactive materials common in mining regions. Sarah nods but makes a mental note of their reaction. How much longer will your assessment take? I have appointments in town later today. We're nearly finished, Reynolds assures her. Just a few more readings to complete our baseline data. As they continue their work, Sarah notices a small red light blinking on the cabin's exterior. Barely visible unless you know where to look. One of Foster's security systems, perhaps triggered by the radiation detection equipment Keller is using. Within 20 minutes, the agents complete their survey, Keller packing up his equipment, while Reynolds thanks Sarah for her cooperation. We'll provide a copy of our findings for your records, Reynolds promises, and we'll be in touch to schedule the interior assessment with proper advance notice. Sarah watches them drive away, waiting until their vehicle disappears down the mountain road before rushing back inside to the hidden chamber. The monitoring equipment is now fully activated screens, displaying data and status indicators glowing amber rather than green. A message appears on the main console: detection grid activated, pattern match gamma spectroscopy equipment, security protocol, alpha initiated. Whatever Foster's security protocol alpha entails, it's clear the visit from Reynolds and Keller was no routine environmental assessment. They were actively searching for evidence of the uranium deposit, and based on Keller's readings, they likely found indications of its presence. Sarah needs to move quickly. She gathers her essential belongings, Foster's letter and key, and heads to her vehicle. She needs to reach the bank in Denver, access Foster's safe deposit box, and understand exactly what she's dealing with before Reynolds, Harrison, or someone else returns with more than just detection equipment. As she drives down the mountain road toward Denver, Sarah's mind races with questions. Who exactly is Reynolds working for? Is it legitimate government oversight, or the same rogue elements Foster had identified? How is Atlas Resources connected to all this? And most importantly, what will she find in Foster's safe deposit box that has been waiting 70 years for someone to discover it? The cabin disappears in her rear-view mirror as Sarah navigates the winding mountain road descending toward the city, where answers and likely more questions await. I've created Act 1 of The Widow's Inheritance, a Cold War legacy, following your specifications. The script maintains the core motif of a single mother discovering hidden value in an abandoned property while incorporating military intelligence elements from the Cold War era. The narrative focuses on Sarah Lawson, an environmental compliance officer who purchases an abandoned cabin only to discover it was a covert CIA monitoring station tracking unusual uranium deposits. The script includes precise military and technical terminology, concise dialogue reflecting the era and cinematic scene descriptions. I've built toward the first twist, 30% mark, revealing the cabin's true purpose as a CIA monitoring station, and Foster's identity as a Manhattan Project physicist rather than a mining engineer. The script maintains a measured pace, slowing for technical explanations while keeping dialogue crisp and period appropriate. Would you like me to continue with Act 2 next? I've set up the story elements that will lead to the larger revelations about the uranium deposit's unique properties and the government agencies competing for control. Denver's late afternoon traffic forms rivers of headlights flowing between steel and glass canyons as Sarah Lawson navigates her aging Ford Escape toward the financial district. The imposing granite facade of First National Bank of Denver stands as a testament to an era when banking institutions projected permanence and security through architectural mass. Sarah parks in an underground garage, her mind racing through the events of the past 12 hours. The cabin purchase that was supposed to be a desperate housing solution has instead thrust her into what feels like a Cold War thriller: hidden government facilities, mysterious uranium deposits, and men in black SUVs carrying sophisticated detection equipment. The bank's marble-floored lobby echoes with her footsteps as she approaches the customer service desk. A middle-aged woman with a professional smile greets her. "I need to access a safe deposit box, please. It's quite old, from 1953. The woman's professional smile falters slightly. "That's unusual. Do you have the key and box number?" Sarah produces Foster's brass key with its attached numbered tag. It may be under the name Gerald Foster. This prompts a more thorough examination of bank records, involving a manager and several minutes of computer searches and consultation of older paper ledgers kept for historical accounts. "This is remarkable," the manager finally says. "The box is indeed registered to Gerald Foster, with annual fees paid through an automatic deduction from a trust account established in 1953. According to our records, it hasn't been accessed since its creation." The revelation confirms Sarah's growing suspicion that Foster's death had been carefully staged, part of a comprehensive plan to preserve his discoveries until they could be safely recovered. "I'll need to see some identification, Miss Lawson, and I'll need to record your access in our security log." Sarah provides her driver's license, watching as the manager meticulously records the details in both electronic and paper systems. Safe deposit contents from this era are sometimes damaged by time. The manager warns as he leads her to the vault. "Paper becomes brittle, metals can corrode, just so you're prepared." The vault door is an impressive circular steel barrier that would be at home in a bank heist film. Inside, row upon row of brass-faced boxes line the walls, each marked with a number. The manager locates box 1322, inserts his master key, then motions for Sarah to use Foster's key. "I'll give you privacy. There's a viewing room through that door when you're ready." When the box opens, Sarah finds its contents in pristine condition, protected by careful packaging and the vault's climate-controlled environment. Foster had prepared these materials for long-term preservation, sealing documents in wax paper and storing photographs in acid-free envelopes. In the privacy of the viewing room, Sarah begins examining the contents. The first envelope she opens contains detailed geological surveys of the uranium deposit Foster had discovered. Page after page of technical data documents the extent, composition, and unique characteristics of what Foster termed the anomaly. According to his surveys, the deposit wasn't merely valuable, it was scientifically unprecedented. Foster's notes describe a phenomenon he called natural cascade enrichment, where the unique geological formations beneath the Blackwater property had somehow concentrated the uranium-235 isotope to levels approaching weapons grade. Normally, uranium must undergo extensive mechanical and chemical processing to separate the rare U-235 isotope from the more common U-238. This enrichment process represents one of the most significant technological barriers to nuclear weapons development. But Foster's discovery suggested nature had performed much of this work, already creating a deposit of uranium with U-235 concentrations far beyond anything found naturally. The strategic implications, especially in the early 1950s, would have been enormous. A nation possessing such a resource could potentially bypass significant portions of the uranium enrichment process, dramatically accelerating weapons production and possibly evading detection by the monitoring systems of that era. The second envelope contains legal documentation establishing Foster's rightful ownership of the Blackwater claim. Deeds, mineral rights certificates, survey registrations, all meticulously organized and officially recorded. But more importantly, these documents connect to a complex trust structure Foster had established, apparently designed to maintain control of the property while obscuring its true ownership. The trust documents include provisions that would activate only under specific conditions. conditions that Foster had apparently designed to identify a worthy successor. One passage highlighted in Foster's precise handwriting stands out. In the event of property transfer via tax lien auction to an individual with no prior connection to interested parties, as defined in Schedule C, full control of trust assets and documentation shall automatically transfer to said individual upon presentation of this instrument and verification of identity. Schedule C lists numerous entities: Atlas Mining Corporation, predecessor to Atlas Resources, the Central Intelligence Agency, the Atomic Energy Commission, the Department of Defense, the State Department, and several names of individuals including Colonel J. Harrington and Dr. W. Harrison Sr. A third envelope contains correspondence that reveals the true circumstances of Foster's disappearance. According to these letters, Foster had been approached by representatives of a mining consortium with connections to government officials shortly after his discovery. Their initial offers to purchase the claim had seemed legitimate, but when he declined, the pressure had escalated to include threats, surveillance, and what Foster described as irregular legal maneuvers designed to force transfer of ownership. Most disturbing are Foster's notes about a visit from federal agents who had informed him that the Blackwater claim was being considered for seizure under national security provisions, a process that would provide minimal compensation and no right of appeal. The justification had been vague references to strategic mineral resources and national defense requirements that Foster suspected were merely pretext for claiming the uranium deposit. Faced with these escalating threats, Foster had implemented his asset preservation protocol, staging his death in a hiking accident while actually relocating to California under an assumed identity. His plan had been meticulously executed, involving trusted allies who had helped create a convincing accident scene and falsified death certificate. The final item in the safe deposit box is a sealed envelope addressed to my successor in Foster's precise handwriting. Inside, Sarah finds a letter dated 2 weeks before his staged death, to the person who has followed the path I created. Your discovery of this letter confirms what I hoped, that someone with intelligence, determination, and integrity would eventually find what I was forced to conceal. The Blackwater property contains wealth beyond monetary measure, not gold as the original miners sought, but knowledge and resources that could serve humanity or threaten it depending on who controls them. I came to this site in 1952 as part of Operation Blackwatch, a classified atomic energy commission program monitoring radiation anomalies throughout the American West. What I discovered beneath the innocent-looking cabin was beyond anything anticipated by my superiors, a natural phenomenon that had concentrated uranium-235 to near weapons-grade levels through geological processes we still don't fully understand. The scientific implications were fascinating, but the strategic implications were terrifying. Here was a deposit of naturally enriched uranium that could potentially allow bypass of the most difficult aspects of weapons development, the very aspects international monitoring was designed to detect. When I reported my findings through official channels, the response was initially appropriate: increased security, scientific verification, strategic assessment. But I soon discovered something deeply troubling: a faction within our intelligence community intended to develop this resource outside normal oversight channels. Let me be clear, this was not official government policy. These were individuals operating within the system, but without proper authorization, what we now call a deep state, motivated by a combination of genuine national security concerns and personal ambition. Their plan, as I pieced it together, was to establish a parallel weapons development program, answerable only to themselves, bypassing civilian oversight, congressional supervision, and international agreements. They spoke of necessary actions and strategic imperatives that could not be constrained by bureaucratic interference. As someone who had witnessed the awesome destructive power of nuclear weapons firsthand, I could not in good conscience allow this to happen. The safeguards we had established after Trinity and Hiroshima were imperfect, but essential. The prospect of nuclear materials being developed outside these constraints was and remains unacceptable. I staged my death and established the legal framework you've now discovered to ensure the Blackwater anomaly remained protected until it could be properly managed. The trust structure maintains the property while creating deliberate barriers to acquisition by any of the entities listed in Schedule C. You now face choices similar to those that confronted me, but with advantages I lacked. The legal framework I created provides protection against the kinds of maneuvers used against me, and the documentation included here offers evidence of the questionable tactics employed by those who sought to seize the claim. My advice based on difficult experience is to proceed cautiously but confidently. Seek independent, scientific assessment of the deposit's current state. Establish legal safeguards through multiple channels to protect your interests. And be prepared for opposition from entities that may have maintained interest in the property throughout the decades. The cabin and underground facility contain additional resources, emergency supplies, communication equipment, and defensive measures I installed before my departure. The monitoring systems are designed to operate indefinitely using a power source I developed based on technology that was experimental in my time. One final note: if you need a trustworthy ally, seek out the Sanderson family in Clear Creek County. Robert Sanderson was my contact in 1953, and his descendants have maintained watch over the property through the decades, though they know only that it contains something of importance to national security. The current family member should be identifiable through county records. The Blackwater anomaly represents not just material wealth, but a legacy of persistence and foresight. Whatever course you choose, I wish you the wisdom to use its resources for humanity's benefit and the strength to protect it from those who would exploit it. With respect and confidence in your abilities, Gerald Foster, Major, USAAF, returning Ph.D., Nuclear Physics, May 1st, 1953. Sarah sits in the bank's private consultation room, surrounded by Foster's carefully preserved legacy, feeling a profound connection to a man she had never met, but whose challenges now mirror her own. Like Foster, she faces decisions about how to protect and develop a valuable discovery while navigating potential threats from powerful interests. But unlike Foster, who had been forced to abandon his discovery and assume a new identity, Sarah has the benefit of his foresight, legal protections. He established documentation of the tactics used against him and guidance based on his experiences. Her next step is clear. She needs competent legal representation from someone who can help her understand the full implications of Foster's trust arrangements and develop a strategy for securing her rights to the uranium deposit. After carefully photographing key documents with her phone and returning everything to the safe deposit box, Sarah heads to the office of Catherine Morgan, an attorney specializing in national security law, whom Linda Reynolds had recommended as fiercely independent and discreet. Morgan's office is located in a historic building near Denver's courthouse, its modest decor suggesting a focus on substance rather than appearances. The attorney herself, a sharp-eyed woman in her mid-50s with prematurely silver hair, listens to Sarah's abbreviated account of her discoveries without interruption, examining the photographs of Foster's documents with methodical attention. This is one of the most fascinating cases I've encountered in 30 years of practice, Morgan finally says, placing her tablet down after reviewing the trust documents. Foster created a legal framework that was decades ahead of its time in terms of sophistication and foresight. Does it provide the protection he intended, Sarah asks. Remarkably, yes. The trust structure effectively prevented anyone from acquiring the property through normal channels, while the tax payment system ensured it wouldn't be lost through tax delinquency. The provision allowing for auction under specific conditions, essentially when the trust identified a suitable successor, was particularly ingenious. Sarah feels a chill at this confirmation. You're saying the timing of the tax auction wasn't coincidental? That Foster's trust somehow arranged for the property to become available specifically when I would find it? Morgan smiles slightly. Not in any mystical sense, but the trust documents include criteria for releasing the property, financial conditions in the mining industry, changes in local property development patterns, even seasonal factors that would affect initial exploration. When those conditions align, the trust was programmed to stop tax payments, triggering the auction process. And I just happened to be the person who saw the listing. Foster's system wasn't designed to identify a specific individual, but rather someone with certain qualities: financial motivation, willingness to take calculated risks, research skills to discover the property's potential. Your background in environmental compliance would have given you advantages in understanding the technical aspects of his documentation. Sarah considers this explanation, finding it simultaneously reassuring and unsettling. Foster had created a system to identify a worthy successor based on attributes rather than identity. And somehow, across 7 decades, that system had selected her. Moving forward, Morgan continues, the trust documentation provides strong legal protection for your ownership of both the property and mineral rights. Foster's careful record-keeping regarding the attempts to seize his claim gives us additional leverage against similar tactics. However, development of the deposit will require proper permits, environmental assessments, and significant investment. What about Atlas Resources? They have already approached me about buying the property. Morgan's expression sharpens. Atlas has a reputation for aggressive acquisition of historic mining claims, particularly those with untapped potential. Their geological survey teams are excellent, which suggests they may have identified the anomaly Foster discovered. I'd recommend extreme caution in any dealings with them. And the government interest Foster mentioned, could they still try to seize the property under national security provisions? The legal landscape has changed significantly since the 1950s. The documentation Foster preserved would make such a seizure legally problematic today, particularly given the questionable justifications used then. However, proper development will require compliance with current environmental and safety regulations. By the end of their consultation, Sarah has a clearer understanding of both her legal position and the challenges ahead. Morgan agrees to represent her interests, beginning with a thorough review of Foster's documentation and preparation of strategies to protect her ownership rights. One final piece of advice, Morgan says as Sarah prepares to leave: trust selectively and verify thoroughly. Foster's experience suggests that multiple entities had interest in his discovery, some operating within legal boundaries, others willing to cross those lines. That pattern may well continue with your rediscovery of the deposit. The warning echoes in Sarah's mind as she drives back toward the mountains, Foster's documentation secured in a folder beside her. She had entered this situation through financial desperation, but now finds herself navigating complex legal, technical, and potentially dangerous territory. As she climbs the winding mountain roads toward the cabin, Sarah notices a vehicle parked at a scenic overlook, a black SUV that looks suspiciously like Harrison's. It's positioned with a clear view of the access road to the Blackwater property, suggesting surveillance rather than tourism. Instead of continuing directly to the cabin, Sarah takes a detour to Pinterest, the small town 15 miles from her property. The general store doubles as a community gathering place, and she hopes to learn more about local perceptions of the Blackwater claim without revealing her specific interests. The store's proprietor, a weathered man in his 60s who introduces himself simply as Mac, responds to her casual questions about local history with the expansive enthusiasm of someone who rarely gets fresh audiences for his stories. Blackwater Mine. That's got more legends attached to it than almost any property in the county, he explains while ringing up the supplies Sarah has selected. Old Man Blackwater worked that claim for 50 years, never struck it particularly rich, but made a steady living. Then this government fellow Foster buys it in '52, spends a few months doing who knows what up there, and then supposedly dies in a hiking accident. Supposedly, sir, Sarah prompts. Mac lowers his voice through the store's empty, except for them. My father was on the search and rescue team that responded when Foster was reported missing. He always said the scene didn't look right. Boot prints going up to a dangerous ledge, but none coming back. Equipment too neatly arranged. No signs of struggle or accident, like it was staged. What happened to the property after that? That's the strangest part. For 70 years, nobody could buy it, even though plenty tried. Mining companies made offers way above market value. Developers wanted to turn it into some fancy retreat. Even the government tried to claim it for some park expansion. But every time something would happen, legal complications, title problems, environmental concerns, and now someone has finally bought it. Who? Sarah asks, maintaining the pretense that she doesn't know who owns the property. Mac nods. Tax auction last week. Word is some city woman got it for practically nothing. Folks around here are taking bets on how long before she sells to Atlas or one of the other companies that have been sniffing around that property for decades. What's Atlas's interest in an old abandoned mine? They claim historical preservation, but that's nonsense. They've been surveying all the properties around the Blackwater claim for years using every technology imaginable. Their geologists practically lived up in these mountains last summer. Whatever they're looking for, they're serious about finding it. This confirmation of Atlas's methodical interest in the area reinforces Sarah's concerns. If they had conducted extensive geological surveys of surrounding properties, they likely had at least theoretical knowledge of the anomaly Foster had discovered. Their inability to access the Blackwater property directly thanks to Foster's legal obstacles explained their immediate approach when she acquired it. As Sarah prepares to leave, Mac adds one final piece of information that sends a chill through her. Strangest thing happened yesterday. Government vehicles up on the access road to the Blackwater property, not local federal plates. 3 black SUVs in what looked like some kind of technical equipment. They told Fred Johnson, who owns the adjacent property, they were conducting an environmental assessment of historic mining sites. But Fred says they seemed mighty interested in that specific piece of land for a random survey. The revelation that federal agencies are showing active interest in the property confirms Foster's warnings about potential government involvement. Between Atlas's corporate interest and apparent federal attention, the Blackwater claim is attracting exactly the kind of scrutiny Foster had fled decades earlier. Sarah thanks Mac for the information and heads back to her vehicle, mind racing with implications. The situation is escalating faster than she had anticipated, with multiple entities clearly aware of her purchase and potentially its significance. As she drives the final miles to the cabin, navigating the deteriorating access road with growing familiarity, Sarah notices fresh tire tracks not from her own vehicle or Linda Reynolds' county Jeep, but from something larger and heavier. Someone has visited the property during her absence. Approaching cautiously, she parks some distance from the cabin and observes it from the cover of surrounding pines. Nothing seems obviously disturbed from the exterior, but the fresh tracks confirm her suspicions that the property is being monitored, perhaps even searched when she's away. Using the forest cover, Sarah circles the cabin, checking the simple alarm systems she had set before leaving. Threads placed across doorways, twigs positioned to fall if windows are opened. None appear to have been triggered, suggesting that whoever visited hasn't attempted to enter the cabin itself. Perhaps they had only conducted an exterior assessment, or perhaps they possessed enough skill to avoid her amateur security measures. After confirming that the hidden entrance to the underground facility remains undisturbed, Sarah returns to her vehicle and approaches the cabin, normally maintaining the appearance of routine in case she is being observed. Inside, she finds confirmation that her instincts were correct. Though nothing is obviously disturbed, subtle signs indicate a professional search has been conducted. Items returned to positions that are close, but not identical to their original placement, dusty surfaces that show evidence of careful examination, the faintest scuff marks where someone has methodically checked for hidden compartments or concealed doors. The searchers had been skilled, thorough, and careful to avoid leaving obvious evidence of their intrusion, but they had missed the hidden entrance to the underground facility, the key to Foster's discovery, and the most valuable aspect of the property. Sarah descends to the underground chamber, confirming that the security systems are still active. The radiation monitoring equipment continues to function, and according to the display, it had detected multiple radiation detection devices in the vicinity earlier that day, consistent with a thorough survey of the property by someone looking specifically for nuclear material. As evening approaches, Sarah considers her options. The increasing interest in the property makes her continued presence potentially risky, especially if federal agencies are involved. But abandoning the cabin would mean surrendering the opportunity Foster had preserved for 70 years, the chance to legitimately control a uranium deposit potentially worth millions. Her thoughts turned to Emily, whose future had been the primary motivation for Sarah's desperate financial gamble. The uranium deposit could provide educational opportunities, financial security, and possibilities that had seemed unattainable just days ago. Surrendering now would mean returning to the precarious existence they had been living since the layoffs began: temporary housing, financial instability, diminished opportunities. The memory of Emily's face when Sarah had explained they would need to leave their Denver apartment trying so hard to be brave while fighting back tears strengthens her resolve. Foster had faced similar pressures and had chosen to preserve his discovery for a future successor rather than abandon it. Sarah will honor that legacy by finding a way to protect what she has discovered while ensuring Emily's future security. Her first call is to Catherine Morgan, explaining the evidence of search activities and the reports of federal interest in the property. The attorney's response is measured but concerned. This accelerates our timeline, Morgan says. We need to establish clear legal protection for your ownership and mineral rights before any formal challenges emerge. I'll file the necessary documentation tomorrow, using Foster's trust provisions to secure your position. What about the federal interest Mac mentioned, environmental assessments? That could be legitimate. Historic mining sites often contain hazardous materials that require evaluation, but it could also be pretext for accessing the property. Either way, our priority is establishing your legal standing before any official actions can be initiated. Sarah's next call is to Linda Reynolds, whose warning about multiple interests in the property had proven accurate. The county official expresses concern but not surprise at the reported activities. The Blackwater property has always attracted attention, Reynolds confirms. But the level of interest since your purchase suggests something has changed, perhaps knowledge that Foster's legal obstacles have finally been overcome. What would you recommend? Sarah asked, trusting Reynolds' local knowledge and apparent desire to help. Don't leave the property unattended for extended periods. Document everything: visitors, unusual activities, evidence of intrusion, and consider bringing in someone you trust to help secure the site. Isolation makes you vulnerable. The suggestion prompts an idea that had been forming in Sarah's mind. Her brother Robert is a former Navy SEAL with extensive security experience and a protective streak that had sometimes annoyed but always comforted his younger sister. Currently between government contracting jobs, he might be persuaded to help assess and secure the cabin, providing both practical assistance and a trusted presence during this critical period. As darkness falls over the mountains, Sarah makes her decision. She will stay and fight for what Foster has preserved, not just for herself, but for Emily, and for the legacy Foster had entrusted to her through his remarkable 7-decade plan. The challenges are substantial, the opponents powerful, but she has resources. Foster had lacked his documentation, legal protections he had established, and knowledge of the tactics previously used against him. Tomorrow she will call Robert and begin implementing a more comprehensive security plan for the property. She will work with Catherine Morgan to establish her legal position beyond challenge, and she will start evaluating how to properly develop the deposit while protecting its environmental and historical significance. In the hidden chamber beneath the cabin, surrounded by Foster's careful work and the evidence of his extraordinary discovery, Sarah feels a growing sense of purpose, replacing the financial desperation that had driven her initial purchase. What had begun as a $1 and $200 gamble to escape mounting bills has become a mission to honor Foster's legacy while securing her daughter's future. The journey ahead will be challenging, the obstacles substantial, but for the first time in months, Sarah faces the future with confidence rather than fear. Foster had believed his selection system would identify a successor with the determination and integrity to complete what he had begun. Now it is her responsibility to prove him right. Robert Lawson arrives at the cabin 3 days later, his work truck loaded with construction supplies, security equipment, and the practical optimism that has always characterized Sarah's older brother. His initial skepticism about her impulsive real estate venture transforms into impressed whistling as he conducts a thorough inspection of the cabin structure. The bones of this place are incredible, he declares, tapping the solid pine logs that form the cabin's walls. Craftsmen built this to last centuries, not decades. Modern contractors don't put this kind of care into multi-million-dollar homes, let alone mining cabins. At 42, Robert carries himself with the quiet confidence of someone who has faced genuine danger and emerged stronger for it. 15 years in naval special warfare, followed by private security contracting, have left him with a perpetual watchfulness and practical approach to problems that complements Sarah's more analytical nature. Sarah has decided to trust Robert completely, showing him the hidden entrance and explaining everything she has discovered about Foster and the uranium anomaly. Her brother's practical nature serves as a perfect counterbalance to the almost fantastical nature of her discovery. His questions focus on structural stability, security vulnerabilities, and renovation priorities, rather than the dramatic implications of Foster's legacy. So this Foster fellow faked his death to protect his discovery, created an elaborate legal mechanism to preserve it for decades, and somehow selected you as his successor through a system he designed in the 1950s. Robert summarizes as they examine the underground facility. That's either the most elaborate estate plan in history or the plot of a Hollywood thriller. The documentation confirms everything, Sarah replies. Catherine Morgan says Foster's legal framework was decades ahead of its time. And the uranium anomaly is real. I've seen the technical data myself. Robert nods, his expression turning more serious. I believe you, but Sarah, you need to understand what you're up against. If this deposit is as valuable as Foster claimed, powerful interests will use every means available to take control of it. Your legal position might be strong on paper, but that doesn't always translate to practical protection. His concern prompts Sarah to share her worries about the property searches and surveillance she has detected. Robert immediately begins implementing enhanced security measures, motion-activated cameras, in concealed locations around the property, reinforced locks on all entrances, and a solar-powered alarm system that will alert them to any intrusion. The cabin needs substantial work before winter, he explains as they create a renovation plan. New roof, upgraded insulation, proper heating system, reliable water source. But our first priority is securing the hidden entrance. If the uranium anomaly is your primary asset, protecting access to it is essential. Over the next week, Robert transforms the hidden door mechanism from Foster's manual system to a reinforced entrance with both mechanical and electronic security. The entrance remains concealed, but now features a locking system that would resist forced entry even if discovered. Meanwhile, Sarah works with Catherine Morgan to file the legal documentation that will secure her ownership rights. Foster's meticulous record-keeping proves invaluable, providing evidence of legitimate acquisition and clear title that withstands initial scrutiny from county officials and the inquiries Morgan reports from interested parties seeking information about the property's status. 10 days after Robert's arrival, they receive their first official visitor, a representative from the Environmental Protection Agency, who presents credentials and a formal notice of inspection for potential hazardous materials typical of historic mining operations. The agent, a methodical woman named Dr. Jensen, who wears the standard-issue government field gear with the comfort of someone accustomed to remote locations, conducts a professional assessment of the property's exterior areas, focusing particularly on soil samples near the visible mine entrance. This is standard procedure for properties with historic mining activity, Jensen explains as she collects samples in labeled containers. Many abandoned mines contain heavy metals, chemical residues from processing operations, or naturally occurring hazards exposed through excavation. Sarah maintains a cooperative but cautious approach, answering questions about her renovation plans, while volunteering no information about Foster's hidden facility or the uranium anomaly. Robert keeps busy with visible construction work, presenting the image of a simple renovation project rather than a high-value mineral discovery. Jensen's inspection appears thorough but routine until she asks an unexpected question. Ms. Lawson, are you aware of any underground structures or excavations on the property beyond the documented Blackwater mine entrance? The question's precision suggests specific knowledge rather than standard procedure. Sarah feels Robert tense beside her, though his expression remains neutral as he continues measuring lumber for the roof repairs. The property records only mention the main mine entrance, Sarah replies carefully. I haven't explored it for safety reasons. Why do you ask? Jensen consults her tablet, swiping through what appears to be geological survey data. Historical mining claims sometimes included exploratory shafts or secondary entrances that weren't documented in official records. We're required to assess all potential contamination vectors, including undocumented excavations. The explanation sounds reasonable, but Sarah remains unconvinced. Jensen's interest seems too specific, her questions too precisely targeted at information that should have been unknown to government agencies if Foster's concealment had been effective. After Jensen departs with her samples and notes, Robert voices the concern that had been building throughout the inspection. That wasn't a routine environmental assessment. She was looking for something specific, something they think is here but can't locate without accessing the property directly. Sarah nods, recalling Foster's notes about government interest in his discovery. But why now after 70 years? And how would they know about the anomaly if Foster's concealment worked? Modern geological survey technology can detect anomalies that weren't identifiable in the 1950s, ground-penetrating radar satellite imaging, specialized sensors. They might have identified the deposit without knowing exactly how to access it. The possibility is concerning. If government agencies have detected the uranium anomaly through technological means, they might be pursuing access through regulatory channels, environmental assessments, safety inspections, or other official processes that would be difficult to legally refuse. That evening, Sarah calls Catherine Morgan to report the EPA inspection and her concerns about its true purpose. Environmental regulations give agencies like EPA broad authority to access private property when potential hazards are suspected, Morgan confirms. However, that authority is limited to legitimate environmental concerns. If they're using environmental pretext to pursue mining interests, that's potentially challengeable. How do we prove their true motives? Documentation and pattern recognition. If multiple agencies request access without legitimate justification, or if their focus is clearly on areas unrelated to environmental hazards, we build a case for improper government action. Meanwhile, accelerating the permit process for your own development strengthens your position. The suggestion prompts Sarah's next step, engaging a reputable nuclear engineering firm to conduct a proper assessment of the uranium anomaly and develop a responsible management plan. Morgan recommends Westridge Consulting, an independent firm with expertise in radiation safety and a reputation for environmental sensitivity. 2 weeks after Robert's arrival with security measures in place and legal documentation filed, Sarah meets with Dr. Eleanor Chen, Westridge's lead engineer at the Denver office of Catherine Morgan. Sarah has decided against bringing the engineer to the property until proper confidentiality agreements are established and Westridge's independence from larger mining interests is confirmed. Chen, a composed woman in her late 40s with the weathered complexion of someone who spends significant time in the field, reviews Foster's geological data with professional interest. If these surveys are accurate, the uranium anomaly represents an unprecedented concentration of U-235 through natural processes. She observes studying Foster's detailed maps. The geological formation he identified appears to have created conditions that mimic aspects of the gaseous diffusion process we use for artificial enrichment. Fascinating from a scientific perspective, but concerning from a security standpoint. Can it be managed responsibly? Sarah asks. I'm concerned about environmental impact and potential security implications. Chen nods approvingly at the question. Modern containment techniques would allow for significantly safer management than was possible in Foster's era. The material could be securely extracted and properly processed through legitimate channels. However, this would require coordination with both the Department of Energy and the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. There's no way to develop this resource privately. The national security implications are too significant. The conversation shifts to practical aspects, permit requirements, safety protocols, regulatory frameworks, and estimated costs for proper management. Chen outlines a phased approach that would begin with detailed assessment of the anomaly's current condition, followed by development of a comprehensive containment and management plan that would satisfy both security and environmental concerns. Based on Foster's documentation and my preliminary analysis, we're potentially looking at a uranium deposit with enrichment levels that would normally cost billions of dollars to achieve through conventional processes. Chen concludes, the scientific value alone is enormous. This could significantly advance our understanding of isotope separation and nuclear material behavior in geological settings. And the potential value, Sarah asks. That's complicated. In purely commercial terms, weapons-grade uranium is worth approximately $50,000 per kilogram. Foster's estimates suggest the deposit could contain several hundred kilograms of highly enriched material. However, this isn't a commercial situation, it's a national security matter. The government would almost certainly invoke various regulations to establish control over the material. So I wouldn't actually benefit from the discovery, not directly from the uranium itself, no. But there would likely be significant compensation for cooperation, scientific grants for further study, and potential ongoing involvement in the research. The key is approaching this proactively rather than waiting for forced intervention. The assessment is sobering. Sarah has escaped immediate financial crisis through her discovery, but the path forward is more complex than simply developing a valuable resource. The national security implications mean government involvement is inevitable. The only question is whether that involvement comes through cooperative partnership or adversarial intervention. As she leaves the meeting with a preliminary assessment plan from Westridge and legal options to consider from Morgan Sarah receives an unexpected call from Linda Reynolds at the county assessor's office. Ms. Lawson, I thought you should know we've received multiple inquiries about the Blackwater property in the past week. Beyond the usual interest from Atlas, we've had requests for property records from the Bureau of Land Management Department of Interior Department of Energy and two private law firms representing unnamed clients. That seems excessive for a simple cabin renovation, Sarah observes. It is, and there is something else. I've been doing some research on Gerald Foster based on our conversation. His background is even more interesting than I initially realized. Before joining the Manhattan Project, he worked on something called the Alsos Mission, a military intelligence operation targeting Nazi nuclear research during World War II. He wasn't just a physicist, he was essentially a scientific intelligence officer. The information adds another dimension to Foster's background, not just a nuclear scientist, but someone with experience in scientific intelligence operations. It explains his sophisticated approach to concealing the uranium anomaly and the elaborate legal framework he created to protect it. There's one more thing, Reynolds continues. I think I've identified the Sanderson family member Foster mentioned in his letter. Robert Sanderson was my uncle, my mother's brother. He never spoke much about his government work, but he did mention once that he was keeping an eye on something important up in the mountains. When he passed in 19, my mother took over whatever responsibility he had, though she never explained exactly what it entailed. And when she tutted 10 years ago, she left me a sealed envelope with instructions to open it only if someone purchased the Blackwater property at auction. Sarah's pulse quickens. And you opened it when I bought the cabin. Yes, inside was a single sheet of paper with a phone number and the words, "Call this number if the successor appears." I called it yesterday. A man answered, listened to my explanation, and said someone would be in contact. I don't know what it means, but I thought you should know. The revelation is stunning. Reynolds isn't merely a helpful county official. She's part of Foster's decades-long contingency plan, the latest in a family line that has been keeping watch over the Blackwater property since 1953. Thank you for telling me, Sarah says. Do you have any idea who might be contacting me? None. My uncle never shared details, just the importance of the responsibility. But whoever it is, they've been waiting 70 years for Foster's plan to activate. After ending the call, Sarah shares this new information with Robert, who immediately strengthens the cabin's security measures and establishes a rotating watch schedule to ensure continuous monitoring of the property. The following morning, as Sarah is reviewing Chen's preliminary assessment, her phone rings with an unlisted number. When she answers, a man's voice, elderly but strong, asks a single question. Did you find the key to box 1322? Sarah hesitates, recognizing the reference to Foster's safe deposit box, but wary of an unknown caller. Who is this? Someone who has been waiting a very long time to speak with Foster's successor. I need to verify you have accessed the documentation before proceeding. Yes, I found the key and accessed the box, Sarah confirms, maintaining caution, but recognizing this may be the contact Reynolds had triggered. Good. My name is James Harrington, Colonel U.S. Air Force retired. I'm the son of Colonel James Harrington, Senior Foster's commanding officer in Operation Blackwatch. My father and Foster worked together until 1952 when they had a significant disagreement about the Blackwater anomaly. I believe Foster mentioned my father in his documentation. Sarah recalls the name from Foster's papers. Colonel James Harrington had been listed among the interested parties in Schedule C of the trust documents, one of the people Foster had been protecting the uranium deposit from. He did, Sarah acknowledges cautiously, not in a particularly positive context. Harrington's dry chuckle carries through the phone. I imagine not. My father and Foster had fundamentally different views on how to handle the discovery. But there's more to the story than Foster knew. We need to meet in person securely. There are matters regarding the Blackwater anomaly that weren't included in Foster's documentation, matters of critical national security importance that have become increasingly urgent. Why should I trust you? According to Foster's records, your father was part of the faction trying to develop the uranium deposit outside proper channels. That was Foster's perception, and it wasn't entirely inaccurate given the information he had access to. But the full reality was more complex. Foster was only cleared for certain aspects of Operation Blackwatch. There were components he wasn't aware of, components that explain why multiple government agencies are suddenly showing renewed interest in the property after decades of apparent inattention. Sarah glances at Robert, who has been listening to her side of the conversation with growing concern. I'm not meeting anyone without significant assurances of safety and legitimacy. Understandable. I suggest a public location of your choosing with whatever security measures make you comfortable. I'm an 86-year-old man with a cane and a pacemaker, hardly a physical threat. But the information I possess is essential to your understanding of what you've discovered. Yet, and after consulting with Robert and Catherine Morgan, Sarah arranges to meet Harrington the following day at a busy restaurant in downtown Denver, with Robert providing security and Morgan present for legal protection. She's skeptical of Harrington's claims, but recognizes that additional information about the uranium anomaly could be valuable regardless of its source. The meeting begins with mutual wariness, Harrington presenting identification and service records to establish his identity, while Sarah maintains a careful distance, Robert positioning himself to observe the entire restaurant for potential threats. Harrington is tall and thin, with the erect posture of a career military officer, despite his advanced age. His eyes are sharp and evaluative, suggesting a mind still fully engaged despite his physical frailty. Miss Lawson, I appreciate your caution. In your position, I would exercise the same prudence. So let me begin with information you can verify independently to establish my credibility. He slides a folder across the table. Inside are copies of classified documents regarding Operation Blackwatch, documents not included in Foster's safe deposit box, but which align with and expand upon Foster's records. The security classifications and formatting appear authentic, though Sarah makes a mental note to have Morgan verify them independently. Foster believed Operation Blackwatch was primarily a radiation monitoring program following the early nuclear test. Harrington begins. That was partially true, but it was also cover for something more significant. The operation's deeper purpose was to investigate an anomalous nuclear event detected in the Colorado mountains in 1947, a radiation signature that didn't match any known test or natural phenomenon. Sarah frowns. Foster's documents mentioned preliminary testing for Operation Crossroads in the area. That was the cover story even within the program. The truth is more complicated. In 1945, during the Trinity test in New Mexico, our monitoring detected an unexpected echo, a secondary radiation signature that appeared to originate from the Colorado Rockies. It was as if the detonation had triggered or activated something in the mountains hundreds of miles away. That's not scientifically plausible, Sarah objects. Nuclear detonations don't create echoes over such distances. Harrington nods approvingly at her skepticism. Under normal circumstances, you'd be absolutely correct, which is why the phenomenon was so concerning. Multiple monitoring stations confirmed that something in the Colorado mountains had responded to the Trinity detonation. Subsequent tests at Bikini Atoll in 1946 produced the same effect. Operation Blackwatch was established to locate and identify the source. And Foster found it the uranium anomaly beneath the Blackwater property. He found part of it, yes, the enriched uranium deposit. But what Foster never discovered, because he went into hiding before the final analysis was complete, was the source of the enrichment. His scientific assumption was that unique geological formations had somehow concentrated the U-235 isotope naturally. The actual explanation is considerably more disturbing. Harrington pauses, seeming to weigh how much to reveal. What I'm about to tell you remains classified at the highest levels, Ms. Lawson. I'm violating several national security laws by sharing it, but at 86 with terminal cancer, my concern for proper handling of this situation outweighs my concern for legal consequences. He leans forward, lowering his voice despite the restaurant's ambient noise. The uranium deposit Foster discovered wasn't created by natural geological processes. It was artificially enriched, but not by any American program. Our analysis eventually determined it had been enriched using a method that didn't match our technology or what we knew of Soviet capabilities. The implication hangs in the air, unspoken but clear. Sarah breaks the silence. You're suggesting alien technology, that's... I'm suggesting unknown technology, Harrington corrects firmly. Whether extraterrestrial, terrestrial, but advanced beyond our understanding, or something else entirely we never determined conclusively. What we did confirm was that the deposit showed isotopic markers inconsistent with any known enrichment process. and it exhibited unusual properties when exposed to nuclear detonations, properties that suggested some form of quantum entanglement across vast distances. Sarah sits back, struggling to process this revelation. If true, it would transform her understanding of what lies beneath the cabin, from a valuable uranium deposit to something of potentially unprecedented scientific significance. Foster's documents make no mention of this, she points out. His analysis was entirely consistent with unusual but terrestrial geological processes. Because that's what he believed. Foster was brilliant, but he was a traditionalist unwilling to consider explanations that fell outside conventional scientific frameworks. When certain test results contradicted his geological theory, he attributed the discrepancies to equipment malfunction or sample contamination. The full analysis confirming the non-terrestrial characteristics was completed after his disappearance. So what happened? If this deposit is as scientifically significant as you're suggesting, why was it abandoned for 70 years? Harrington's expression darkens. That's where your understanding of the situation from Foster's perspective becomes relevant. There was indeed a faction within the government that wanted to develop the deposit outside normal channels, but not for the reasons Foster assumed. They weren't seeking to bypass oversight for weapons development. They were attempting to study the anomalous properties without triggering wider scientific scrutiny that might reveal the deposit's true nature. And now, why the sudden interest after decades of apparent inattention? Because the anomaly is becoming active again. Since 2023, we've detected increasing radiation signatures from the site signatures that correlate with recent nuclear activities in North Korea and Pakistan. It's as if the deposit is responding to nuclear events globally, just as it responded to Trinity and the Bikini tests. The correlation pattern suggests the activation is accelerating. If it continues on its current trajectory, the deposit could reach critical state within months. Critical state, you mean it could detonate? We don't know exactly what critical means in this context. It could be a conventional nuclear reaction or something entirely different. What we do know is that the energy signatures are building in a pattern that physics says shouldn't be possible, the same impossible pattern we observed in 1945 and 1946. Sarah exchanges glances with Robert, whose expression has shifted from skepticism to grave concern. As a former military specialist, he recognizes the technical terminology Harrington is using and its implications. If what you're saying is true, why approach me? Why not simply seize the property through national security provisions? Two reasons. First, Foster's legal framework is remarkably robust. Challenging it would create delays we can't afford given the accelerating timeline. Second, and more importantly, we've learned from past mistakes. Heavy-handed intervention tends to produce worse outcomes than cooperative engagement. You discovered the site because Foster's system identified you as someone with the qualities necessary to make the right decisions. We're respecting that assessment. Sarah considers this explanation, still wary but increasingly concerned about the potential threat Harrington is describing. What exactly are you proposing? A joint scientific assessment of the anomaly conducted transparently with your full involvement and proper legal protections for your interests. In exchange for your cooperation, you'd receive fair compensation for the property ongoing consultation fees, for site management, and most importantly, the opportunity to contribute to understanding one of the most significant scientific mysteries of our time. And if I refuse, Harrington sighs, then we proceed through legal channels, national security declarations, court orders, the full bureaucratic process. We'd eventually gain access, but precious time would be lost, and the relationship would be adversarial rather than collaborative. Neither outcome serves the greater good. Sarah looks to Morgan, who has been silently evaluating the legal implications of Harrington's proposal. We would need comprehensive guarantees, the attorney says, full transparency, independent scientific verification, proper compensation, and legal protections against future claims. All reasonable requests, Harrington agrees. We can begin drafting the necessary agreements immediately. As the meeting concludes, Sarah remains cautious but increasingly convinced of the seriousness of the situation. Harrington's explanation, while extraordinary, accounts for the pattern of interest in the property and the sophisticated monitoring equipment she had observed during recent visits by government agents. Returning to the cabin that evening, Sarah and Robert discussed the implications of Harrington's revelations deep into the night. If he's telling the truth, the uranium anomaly represents something far beyond a valuable mineral deposit. It's a scientific phenomenon with potentially global implications. "What are you thinking?" Robert asks as they sit on the cabin's porch, watching the stars emerge in the mountain sky. "I'm thinking Gerald Foster would have hated this explanation," Sarah replies with a small smile. His entire scientific worldview was based on rational, explainable phenomena. The idea that he had discovered something potentially non-terrestrial or operating outside known physics would have offended his sensibilities. "But you're considering it." "I'm considering all possibilities, including that Harrington is manipulating us with an elaborate science fiction story." But his technical details were specific and verifiable, his classified documentation appeared authentic, and most importantly, his explanation accounts for patterns of interest that otherwise make little sense. "So what's your next move?" Sarah looks up at the stars, thinking about Foster's 70-year plan and the responsibility he had passed to her. "We verify Harrington's claims independently through Catherine's contacts. We engage Dr. Chen to conduct initial radiation measurements to confirm or refute the activation pattern Harrington described. And we prepare legal frameworks that protect our interests while allowing proper scientific assessment of whatever lies beneath this property." "And Emily, when do we bring her out here?" "Not yet. Not until we understand exactly what we're dealing with and ensure it's safe." Foster believed this site was secure enough to leave unmonitored for decades, but if Harrington is right about recent changes in the anomaly's behavior, we need to establish definitive safety parameters first. As they continue their discussion, a soft beeping sound emerges from the cabin, Foster's monitoring equipment activating. Sarah and Robert rush inside and down to the hidden chamber, where the detection grid is showing multiple radiation sensors approaching the property from different directions. "Someone's conducting a coordinated survey," Robert observes, studying the display. "Multiple teams converging pattern. This isn't casual interest, it's a systematic operation." The monitors show 7 distinct radiation signatures moving through the surrounding forest, too many to be coincidental, too coordinated to be separate entities acting independently. Someone is implementing a comprehensive effort to map the anomaly using a level of resources that suggests governmental or major corporate backing. "Harrington," Sarah suggests. Robert shakes his head. "Too soon after our meeting. This operation would have required days of planning. More likely it's one of the other interested parties, either Atlas Resources or a government agency Harrington doesn't represent." As they watch the monitoring system, the radiation signatures continue their methodical sweep, gradually constructing a detection pattern centered on the cabin. Whoever is conducting this operation is building a detailed map of the anomaly information that could be used to locate and potentially access the uranium deposit without entering the property itself. "We need to accelerate our timeline," Sarah decides. "If multiple entities are actively pursuing the anomaly, waiting for gradual legal processes could result in losing control of the situation entirely." "What are you suggesting?" "We contact Harrington tonight. Tell him we're willing to proceed with joint scientific assessment immediately, but only under strict conditions that protect our legal position. And we bring in Dr. Chen tomorrow to begin independent verification of the activation pattern." The decision marks a turning point. Rather than remaining reactive to the growing interest in the property, Sarah is taking the initiative, establishing her terms for cooperation while maintaining control of the asset Foster entrusted to her. As she makes the call to Harrington, Sarah realizes that her role has evolved beyond simply inheriting a valuable property. She has become the custodian of a scientific mystery 7 decades in the making, one with potential implications that extend far beyond her personal financial situation or even national security. Foster had designed his elaborate system to identify a successor with the curiosity, intelligence, and determination necessary to make the right decisions about his discovery. Now Sarah must prove his selection process had worked as intended. The following morning, as dawn breaks over the mountains, 3 black SUVs appear on the access road, Harrington's response to Sarah's accelerated timeline. At the same time, Chen arrives in her West Ridge consulting vehicle equipment, packed for comprehensive radiation assessment. "Let the games begin," Robert murmurs as they watch the vehicles approach. "Not games," Sarah corrects. "This is exactly what Foster hoped for his discovery, being properly assessed through legitimate scientific channels, with appropriate oversight and transparency. You trust Harrington's version of events? I trust but verify. Chen works for us, not them. She'll conduct independent measurements that either confirm or refute Harrington's claims about the anomaly's activation. And Morgan, he has prepared legal documentation that protects our interests regardless of what the assessment discovers. As the vehicles park and their occupants emerge, Harrington, supported by a younger assistant, accompanied by what appear to be scientific personnel with sophisticated equipment, Sarah takes a deep breath, preparing to face whatever truth lies beneath the cabin Foster had preserved for 7 decades. The mountain wind carries the scent of pine and possibilities as she steps forward to greet them, Foster's journal in her hand and his mission in her mind. Whatever happens next, she will honor the legacy of the man who believed in finding the right person for an impossible task and who somehow across the decades had found her. "Welcome to Blackwater," she says. "Let's find out what we're really dealing with." The scientific team Harrington has brought includes specialists in nuclear physics, radiation detection, and anomalous materials. They set up their equipment on the cabin's perimeter, careful to remain outside until formal agreements are signed. Chen establishes her independent monitoring stations alongside them, creating parallel data streams that will allow for comparison and verification. As the legal representatives review the final documentation, Harrington approaches Sarah with a thin file folder. "Before we proceed, there's something you should see, something I wasn't authorized to share yesterday." Inside the folder is a single photograph, black and white, dated August 1947. It shows a younger Gerald Foster standing beside Colonel Harrington Sr. in what appears to be the underground chamber beneath the cabin. Both men are in military uniforms, looking solemnly at the camera. Between them on a laboratory table sits an object unlike anything Sarah has seen before, a metallic, almost crystalline structure, approximately the size of a basketball, with geometric patterns that seem to shift even in the static photograph. "What is this?" Sarah asks, studying the image. "The actual source of the anomaly," Harrington replies quietly. "What Foster discovered wasn't just enriched uranium, it was this object surrounded by uranium that had been altered by its presence. We've never determined its composition or origin. All attempts at analysis have been inconclusive. The only thing we know with certainty is that it responds to nuclear events through some mechanism we don't understand, and that response appears to be intensifying." Sarah stares at the photograph, trying to process this revelation that fundamentally changes her understanding of what lies beneath the cabin. Not merely a uranium deposit with unusual properties, but something potentially non-terrestrial, an object of unknown origin and purpose that has been influencing the surrounding materials for decades. "Foster never mentioned this in any of his documentation," she says, still studying the photograph, "because shortly after this picture was taken, the object disappeared. Foster believed my father's faction had removed it for secret study. My father believed Foster had hidden it to prevent military application of its properties. The truth, which neither of them knew at the time, is that the object phased from our observable reality, literally disappeared, while under observation, only to remanifest months later. This cycle of manifestation and disappearance continued with increasing intervals until 1953, when it vanished completely." "Until now," Sarah guesses. Harrington nods. "Our detection systems registered its reemergence 6 months ago, the first signal in 70 years. Since then, the pattern of energy emissions has been escalating, correlating with nuclear events globally. Whatever it is, it's becoming more active than at any time since we first detected it." Sarah hands the photograph back, her mind racing with implications. If Harrington's account is accurate, the true value beneath the Blackwater property isn't the enriched uranium Foster had documented, but something far more significant, an object of unknown origin with properties that defy conventional physics. "Why wasn't this in the briefing yesterday?" "Classification restrictions. I needed direct authorization, which I received last night after your call, indicated willingness to cooperate. The existence of the object remains compartmentalized at the highest levels, known only to a small group within military intelligence and the Department of Energy. And Atlas resources. How do they fit into this?" Harrington's expression darkens. "That's another concerning development. Atlas is a front for a private research consortium with connections to various intelligence agencies globally. Their interest in the anomaly appears to be independent of official government channels, possibly representing foreign interests or private entities seeking technological advantage. The revelation adds another layer of complexity to the situation. Not merely a scientific anomaly with national security implications, but the focus of covert interest from multiple entities with potentially competing agendas. Dr. Lawson, Chen's urgent call interrupts their conversation. You need to see this. The radiation physicist is staring at her monitoring equipment, expression troubled. On the display, a clear pattern is emerging: radiation levels beneath the cabin pulsing in a rhythmic sequence that, according to the timestamps, is accelerating. This shouldn't be possible, Chen says as Sarah approaches. We're seeing coherent radiation emissions with a distinct pattern, almost like a signal, and the frequency is increasing at a geometric rate. One of Harrington's scientists joins them, comparing readings from their equipment. Confirmed. The pattern matches what we've been tracking for the past 6 months, but the acceleration rate has increased significantly just within the last hour. Since we arrived with detection equipment, Sarah observes, almost as if it's responding to our presence, or to the concentration of monitoring devices, Chen suggests. If this phenomenon interacts with observation in some quantum mechanical sense, she doesn't finish the thought, but the implication is clear. Their very act of measurement might be influencing the behavior of whatever lies beneath the cabin. We need to access the chamber immediately, Harrington's lead scientist urges. These readings suggest rapidly approaching criticality of some kind. Robert moves to Sarah's side, expression concerned. The legal agreements aren't finalized. If we grant access now, we lose our strongest negotiating position. If that thing hits critical state, negotiating positions become irrelevant, Harrington counters. We're potentially facing an unprecedented event with unknown consequences. Sarah studies the monitoring equipment, watching as the pulsing pattern continues its acceleration. Foster had protected this anomaly for decades, designing an elaborate system to ensure it would be properly managed when the time came. That time appears to be now, whether the legal frameworks are complete or not. We proceed together, she decides. Joint access, shared data, mutual oversight. Chen represents our scientific interests, Morgan our legal position. But we move now before whatever's happening down there progresses further. The decision made, Sarah leads the combined team to the hidden entrance, entering the security code Robert had installed on the reinforced door. As it swings open, revealing the staircase descending into the underground chamber, a visible pulse of blue-tinged light emanates from below, a phenomenon not present during any of her previous visits. Serenkov radiation, one of Harrington's scientists murmurs, but without a water medium. That shouldn't be possible. Very little about this situation fits established physics, Harrington responds dryly. The team descends cautiously, radiation detectors and specialized equipment leading the way. The underground chamber has transformed since Sarah's last visit. Foster's monitoring equipment, now fully activated, displays showing readings that exceed their design parameters. But more striking is what occupies the center of the room. Where previously there had been empty floor space, now a spherical object hovers approximately 3 feet above the ground, the same crystalline structure from the 1947 photograph, but now pulsing with internal light that shifts through spectrums from ultraviolet to infrared. Around it, the air seems to distort, as if space itself is being warped by its presence. My God, Chen whispers, it's altering the fundamental forces within its proximity. The scientific team spreads out, establishing monitoring positions while maintaining a cautious distance from the object. Their equipment registers multiple anomalous readings, radiation patterns that don't match known isotopes, gravitational distortions that shouldn't be possible within Earth's field, and energy signatures that fluctuate in patterns correlating with nuclear activities globally. It's like a node in a network, Harrington's lead scientist observes, connecting to similar phenomena elsewhere through some mechanism we don't understand, or responding to human nuclear activity worldwide, another suggests, like an immune system reaction. As they continue their observations and measurements, the object's pulsing accelerates further, the distortion field around it expanding visibly. Equipment begins to malfunction, displays showing impossible readings before shutting down entirely. We need to establish containment, Harrington urges. Whatever's happening is escalating beyond our ability to monitor safely. Containment how? Sarah challenges. We don't even understand what we're dealing with. Foster had protocols, Harrington reveals. developed after the object's first manifestation cycle. They were theoretical, never implemented because the object disappeared before testing could begin. But the designs should still exist in the Blackwatch archives, which would take days to access through official channels, Robert points out. Not necessarily. Harrington responds, turning to his assistant. Authorization Umbra 73 Alpha, full access to Blackwatch containment, protocols, immediate implementation. The assistant nods, moving to a secure communication device. This will take approximately 30 minutes to process and transmit, sir. We may not have 30 minutes, Chen interjects, pointing to her remaining functional monitoring device. The energy curve is approaching what theoretical models would consider a phase transition point. Whatever this object is going to do, it's about to do it. As if responding to her assessment, the object's pulsing suddenly synchronizes into a steady, brilliant glow. The distortion field stabilizes, creating what appears to be a perfectly spherical boundary, approximately 10 feet in diameter, with the object at its center. It's containing itself, one of the scientists observes with wonder, creating a localized space-time bubble. Within this boundary, visible phenomena begin to manifest complex geometric patterns, forming and dissolving mathematical sequences, expressing themselves in light and shadow, in occasional glimpses of what appear to be landscapes or structures unlike anything terrestrial. It's not just an object, Chen whispers. It's a window or portal of some kind. Or a message, Sarah suggests, watching the patterns with growing recognition. These sequences, their prime numbers, Fibonacci series fundamental constants, basic mathematical language. A test of intelligence, Harrington wonders, or an introduction, Chen counters, establishing common conceptual ground before more complex communication. And as they watch the mathematical patterns give way to more sophisticated imagery, molecular structures, atomic models, and eventually what appears to be a representation of the solar system, with Earth highlighted in a trajectory marked from beyond the outer planets. My God, Harrington breathes. It's telling us its origin. The implications are staggering. Not merely an anomalous object with unusual properties, but potentially a deliberate artifact of non-terrestrial intelligence, placed or crashed on Earth, and now activating in response to human nuclear activity. Foster never knew, Sarah realizes. He thought he was protecting a uranium deposit with unusual properties. He had no idea what it actually was. Or he did, and that's why he went to such extraordinary lengths to ensure it would be properly handled. Harrington counters. Remember, he disappeared before the final analysis was complete. The object vanished shortly after. Perhaps he understood more than his official reports indicated. As the projection continues its increasingly complex display, Sarah notices something troubling. The containment field is expanding slowly but steadily, now almost touching the chamber walls. Whatever process has been initiated, it appears to be progressing beyond initial parameters. We need to evacuate, Robert states firmly. Until we understand what's happening, maintaining safe distance is our only option. Agreed, Harrington says, surprising Sarah with his immediate concurrence. Full withdrawal to minimum safe distance, continued monitoring from remote positions only. The scientific team begins organizing rapid withdrawal, securing what equipment remains functional, and establishing remote observation capabilities. As they prepare to ascend the stairs, Sarah notices a final image forming within the projection field, what appears to be a countdown sequence displaying what could be interpreted as approximately 48 hours based on Earth time notation. It's giving us a timetable, she observes. Whatever this process is, it has a defined duration, or deadline, Harrington adds grimly. As they exit the underground chamber and secure the hidden entrance, the implications of what they've witnessed begin to settle. Not a uranium deposit with unusual properties, but something far more profound, potentially the first confirmed evidence of non-terrestrial intelligence activating after decades of dormancy, possibly in response to human nuclear activities. The cabin that Sarah purchased for $1.200 is a desperate housing solution, now stands at the center of what may be the most significant scientific discovery in human history. And whatever process has been initiated beneath it appears to be approaching culmination within the next 48 hours. Foster's 70-year plan had succeeded in identifying a successor with the curiosity, intelligence, and determination necessary to manage his discovery. But even Foster hadn't fully understood what he was protecting or what Sarah would ultimately face when his elaborate system finally activated. As the combined team establishes a secure perimeter around the cabin, preparing for whatever might emerge from beneath it, Sarah realizes that her role has evolved beyond anything Foster could have anticipated. She isn't merely the inheritor of a valuable mineral deposit or scientific anomaly. She has become humanity's representative in what appears to be first contact with an intelligence not of this world. The mountain winds carry the scent of pine and possibility as night falls over the Blackwater property. Beneath the cabin, something ancient and new simultaneously awaits humanity's response to its awakening. And Sarah Lawson, who came seeking only affordable housing and financial stability, now stands at the threshold of a discovery that could transform human understanding of our place in the universe. The countdown continues its inexorable progression. 47 hours and counting. I've completed Act 2 of The Widow's Inheritance, a Cold War Legacy, according to your specifications. The script maintains the Tom Clancy, Michael Crichton style with accurate military and Cold War terminology while building tension toward the major twist. The twist occurs at approximately 65% into Act 2, revealing that the uranium deposit isn't simply a natural phenomenon, but actually surrounds a mysterious object of potentially non-terrestrial origin that responds to nuclear events worldwide. This revelation completely changes the understanding of what Sarah has discovered while remaining grounded in Cold War scientific research and government secrecy. The narrative incorporates night falls over the Blackwater property as a perimeter of floodlights illuminates the cabin and surrounding area. Military-grade equipment now surrounds the site, radiation monitors, signal detection arrays, and sophisticated containment technology rushed in by Harrington's team. A temporary command center has been established 50 yards from the cabin, housing the combined scientific and security personnel, now focused on the unfolding situation. Inside the command center, screens display real-time data from remote sensors monitoring the object beneath the cabin. The countdown continues its steady progression, 45 hours remaining until whatever process has been initiated reaches completion. Sarah stands before a topographic map of the property, Robert at her side as Harrington briefs a newly arrived team of specialists, physicists, linguists, and military personnel with specialized training in unconventional threats. The object appears to be of non-terrestrial origin, with properties that violate multiple laws of known physics. Harrington explains, it's generating a self-contained field that's expanding at a controlled rate, currently stabilized at approximately 12 feet in diameter. Within this field, we're observing phenomena consistent with space-time manipulation, possible glimpses of other locations or dimensions. And the countdown, a stern-faced Air Force general asks, 45 hours until completion of the current phase. Whether that represents a transition to another state activation of some function or something else entirely remains unknown. Threat assessment. Harrington glances at Sarah before responding. Inconclusive. The object has demonstrated no overtly hostile actions. Its emissions remain contained within the self-generated field. The mathematical and astronomical displays suggest attempted communication rather than weapon deployment. However, our understanding is severely limited by the technology gap. Recommendations. Continue observation, attempt structured response to the mathematical sequences, demonstrate comprehension and intelligence. Maintain containment preparations, but avoid provocative actions that might be interpreted as hostile style. The general nods, turning to Sarah. Ms. Lawson, as the property owner, in initial contact, your input is valued. What's your assessment of the situation? Sarah studies the monitoring displays, considering her response carefully. I believe we're witnessing an attempted communication. The sequential nature of the mathematical displays suggests a deliberately structured approach, establishing basic concepts before advancing to more complex information. It's methodical, patient, and non-threatening in presentation. That aligns with our linguistic team's preliminary assessment. A woman in civilian clothing interjects. The object is using universal mathematical constants as a foundation for communication, a method consistent with theoretical first contact protocols. So we respond in kind, the general concludes. Establish communication while maintaining security. Dr. Chen, your team will coordinate with our specialists to develop appropriate mathematical responses. Chen nods, already conferring with the linguistic experts about formulaic approaches to acknowledge the object's communications. The atmosphere in the command center is tense but focused, a convergence of scientific curiosity and security concerns driving a coordinated response to the unprecedented situation. As the teams organize their efforts, Sarah steps outside for a moment of quiet reflection. The night air is cool and clear, the star-filled sky a reminder of the vastness beyond Earth. The cabin, her impulsive $1, $200 purchase, now stands at the center of what could be humanity's first confirmed contact with non-terrestrial intelligence. Robert joins her, his military training evident in his vigilant posture despite the secured perimeter. "You holding up okay?" "Still processing. 24 hours ago, I was worried about roof repairs and winter insulation. Now I'm involved in potential first contact with an alien intelligence." "Life comes at you fast," Robert quips, though his expression remains serious. "Harrington seems competent, but I'm concerned about the growing military presence. If this shifts from scientific curiosity to perceived threat, the response protocols change dramatically." "You think they'd attempt to destroy it?" "Standard containment protocol for unknown threats includes neutralization options. I've been in enough classified briefings to know how these scenarios typically unfold when fear outweighs curiosity." Sarah considers this sobering assessment. "We need to maintain civilian scientific authority. The moment this becomes a military operation, we lose control of the outcome." "Agreed. And there is something else. Atlas Resources hasn't made any moves since the government teams arrived. That seems out of character based on their previous interest." "They're watching, waiting." Harrison struck me as calculating, not the type to confront federal authorities directly, but not one to abandon valuable objectives either. Their conversation is interrupted by the arrival of a government helicopter landing in a cleared area near the command center. From it emerges a distinguished older man in a tailored suit, accompanied by security personnel with the unmistakable bearing of Secret Service agents. "Secretary of Energy," Robert identifies quietly. This has officially escalated to cabinet level. The arrival of such a high-ranking official transforms the operational atmosphere. Staff straighten, security tightens, and Harrington emerges from the command center to greet the secretary with the deference due his position. Sarah and Robert return to the command center, where the secretary is being briefed on the situation. His presence brings both additional resources and heightened scrutiny as national security implications move to the forefront of considerations. "Ms. Lawson," the secretary acknowledges as she enters, "I understand we have you to thank for managing this situation with remarkable composure. The President sends his personal appreciation for your cooperation." "I'm simply trying to handle the situation responsibly," Sarah responds, "as I believe Gerald Foster would have wanted." "Ah, yes, Major Foster. His foresight continues to serve the nation even 70 years later." The secretary turns to the assembled team. "I've reviewed the preliminary reports. The President has authorized Operation Stellar Guardian, a joint scientific and security response with 3 primary objectives: establish communication if possible, contain any potential threats, and prevent unauthorized access to the anomaly." He gestures to the monitoring displays. "Our priority is understanding what we're dealing with before the countdown reaches 0. Every scientific and analytical resource is at your disposal. Director Harrington will maintain operational command with Dr. Chen leading civilian scientific efforts." His gaze returns to Sarah. "Ms. Lawson, while we've established temporary authority over the site under national security provisions, we recognize your legal ownership in the unique role Foster designated for you. We request your continued participation as a civilian advisor to the operation. The formalization of government control is inevitable, given the circumstances, but Sarah appreciates the acknowledgement of her position. "I'll continue to assist in any way possible, Mr. Secretary. My primary concern is ensuring this situation is resolved safely for my daughter and the surrounding communities." "A priority we share," the Secretary assures her. "We've established a 5-mile security cordon under the cover of a hazardous materials incident. Civilian populations are not at risk." As the meeting continues, the scientific team reports progress in analyzing the mathematical sequences projected by the object. "It's establishing increasingly complex concepts," Chen explains, "beginning with basic mathematics, advancing to physics principles, and now approaching what appears to be information about its origin and purpose." "Can we respond effectively?" the Secretary asks. We've begun transmitting mathematical acknowledgments using specialized equipment. The object appears to be registering our responses, adjusting its projections to build on concepts we've confirmed understanding of. So it's learning about us while teaching us about itself, Sarah observes. Precisely. It's a remarkably efficient communication protocol given the absence of shared language. As dawn approaches, the communication process continues to evolve. The object projects what appears to be a galactic map, highlighting a star system in what astronomers identify as the vicinity of Alpha Centauri. Subsequent projections show what might be interpreted as a journey or expedition, culminating with arrival on Earth approximately 12,000 years ago. It's giving us its history, Chen explains, excitement overcoming scientific detachment. If we're interpreting correctly, this object has been on Earth since prehistoric times, dormant, until activated by our nuclear detonations. An ancient sentinel, Harrington muses, programmed to awaken when a civilization reaches nuclear capability, which raises the question of its purpose. The secretary notes, observation intervention, something else entirely. The answer begins to form as the object's projections shift to displaying atomic structures, first simple elements, then increasingly complex molecules, and finally what appears to be a comprehensive analysis of radioactive decay and nuclear chain reactions. It's focusing on nuclear physics, Chen observes, particularly the processes involved in weapons technology. Threat assessment, the general asks immediately. Not necessarily threatening, Chen counters. It could be establishing context for its purpose, demonstrating that it understands the technology that awakened it. The projections continue now, showing simulations of nuclear detonations, followed by cascading effects through ecosystems' atmosphere and global climate. The message becomes increasingly clear, a detailed demonstration of the long-term consequences of nuclear warfare. It's not threatening us, Sarah realizes. It's warning us. The linguistic specialist nods in agreement. The sequential presentation is consistent with educational methodology, establishing foundational concepts before presenting conclusions. It's teaching rather than threatening. As the 30-hour mark approaches, the object's communications advance to displaying what appears to be alternative energy, technologies, fusion systems beyond current human capabilities, but theoretically sound based on established physics principles. It's offering solutions, Chen breathes, showing us alternatives to our current nuclear technologies. The implications are profound, not merely first contact, but potential access to advanced scientific knowledge that could transform human energy production and eliminate dependence on technologies with catastrophic military applications. The secretary confers quietly with his advisors before addressing the team. This development significantly alters our approach. If this object is indeed offering beneficial technology, securing and understanding, it becomes a matter of not just national, but global importance, and considerably more complex from a security standpoint, the general adds. Knowledge of this magnitude would spark international competition for access and control. As they discuss implications, an alert sounds from the perimeter security system. Multiple vehicles are approaching the access road, civilian SUVs with corporate markings. Atlas Resources. Robert confirms, checking the security feed. Harrison is leading what appears to be a technical team. They've stopped at the outer checkpoint. The secretary's expression hardens. How did they learn of the situation? The cover story should have been sufficient to explain the security cordon. Atlas has connections throughout government and industry, Harrington explains, and their geological surveys likely detected the same anomalous readings that alerted our systems. They've been pursuing this discovery for years. Deny access, the secretary orders. This situation is under federal jurisdiction. As security personnel move to intercept the Atlas team, another alert sounds, this one from the monitoring systems tracking the object beneath the cabin. The containment field has suddenly expanded, now filling the entire underground chamber and beginning to extend upward through the cabin structure. Energy readings are spiking, Chen reports urgently. The field is growing at an exponential rate compared to previous stability. Monitors throughout the command center display the rapid expansion sensors at various distances, reporting unusual gravitational and electromagnetic effects extending beyond the cabin itself. Evacuation protocol, Alpha, the general orders. Fall back to minimum safe distance. As the command center erupts into organized activity, Sarah notices something on one of the monitoring displays, a correlation between the field's expansion and the arrival of the Atlas team. The timing is too precise to be coincidental. It's responding to the new presence, she realizes, just as it activated more fully when Harrington's team arrived with detection equipment. Observation affects behavior, Chen confirms, but this reaction is significantly stronger. The evacuation proceeds efficiently, equipment and personnel relocating to predetermined positions half a mile from the cabin. As they establish the new command post, the object's behavior continues to evolve. The expanding field has now enveloped the entire cabin, creating a shimmering dome of energy, visible even to the naked eye. Radiation levels are elevated but contained within the field, Chen reports. No harmful emissions detected beyond the perimeter. Within the dome, the cabin itself appears to be dissolving its physical structure, becoming transparent as the object at the center grows more distinct and brilliant. The mathematical projections have ceased, replaced by a pulsing energy pattern that synchronizes with what sensors identify as global background radiation, the collective output of all nuclear facilities worldwide. It's connecting to something larger, Harrington observes, establishing a network with other nodes. Other objects like this one, the secretary asked sharply. Unknown, but the pattern suggests distributed components communicating through some mechanism we don't understand. As they monitor the situation, Harrison approaches the command post under military escort, his corporate team held at the perimeter. Despite the circumstances, he maintains his composed professional demeanor. Secretary Dalton, he acknowledges, I believe Atlas Resources can offer valuable assistance in this situation. Our research into the Blackwater anomaly spans decades. Your presence here violates a federal security cordon, Mr. Harrison, the secretary responds coldly. Explanation required. Harrison smiles thinly. Atlas has been monitoring radiation signatures from this location since the 1970s. When those signatures increased dramatically yesterday, we naturally investigated. Our concern is scientific and humanitarian, ensuring proper management of a potentially hazardous phenomenon. Your concern is noted. Your assistance is not required. This operation is under federal jurisdiction. With respect, Mr. Secretary, Atlas possesses relevant historical data unavailable to government agencies. Data that might prove critical to understanding what's occurring. The Secretary studies Harrison skeptically. What exactly does Atlas know about this situation? Atlas was founded specifically to monitor this anomaly, Harrison reveals. Our corporate mining operations are largely cover for a scientific mission established by Dr. William Harrison Sr. in 1954, continuing the work begun under Operation Blackwatch before its official termination. Harrington stiffens at this revelation. Blackwatch wasn't terminated. It was classified and compartmentalized. The official program was, yes, but my father, who served as the program's civilian scientific director, believed the government's approach was fundamentally flawed. He established Atlas as an independent research entity to continue studying the anomaly without military oversight or Cold War paranoia influencing scientific objectivity. The claim is startling, suggesting parallel research has been conducted for decades outside government knowledge. More concerning is the implication that Atlas might possess understanding of the anomaly beyond what Harrington's team has assembled. What exactly does Atlas know? Sarah asked directly. Harrison turns to her. We know this isn't the first activation cycle, Ms. Lawson. The object has awakened approximately every 70 years throughout recorded history, coinciding with periods of significant human conflict or technological advancement. We've documented cycles in 1878, 1808, 1738, and so on, each lasting approximately 48 hours before the object returns to dormancy. That's impossible, Harrington objects. We only detected its energy signature after nuclear detonations in the 1940s. Because nuclear technology created emissions your instruments could detect. Earlier cycles manifested differently through magnetic anomalies, unusual aurora patterns, or gravitational disturbances. Indigenous peoples in this region recorded these cycles in their oral histories, describing a star spirit that awakens to counsel the people during times of great change. This new perspective fundamentally alters their understanding of the situation. Not a recent activation triggered specifically by nuclear technology, but a recurring cycle spanning centuries or perhaps millennia, suggesting a long-term monitoring or guidance function rather than a simple response to human nuclear capability. The Secretary considers this information weighing security protocols against the potential value of Atlas's historical data. Mr. Harrison, your team will remain at the perimeter. You personally may join our scientific consultation group, but only under continuous security monitoring. Any information you provide will be verified independently before operational decisions are made. Harrison accepts these terms with a slight nod. A reasonable precaution. My priority is ensuring proper scientific approach to the phenomenon, regardless of who manages the process. As Harrison is integrated into the scientific team, the countdown continues its progression, 22 hours remaining. The energy dome surrounding the cabin has stabilized at approximately 50 yards in diameter, its surface shimmering with patterns reminiscent of atmospheric plasma. Within this dome, the object now hovers fully visible, the cabin structure having been completely absorbed or transformed. Sensors indicate extraordinary physics within the field, altered gravitational constants, modified electromagnetic properties, and what appears to be localized manipulation of time itself, with processes inside the dome occurring at different rates than outside. It's creating controlled environment for direct interaction, Chen hypothesizes, adapting physical constants to accommodate communication between fundamentally different forms of intelligence. Or preparing for something else entirely, the general cautions. As night falls again over the mountains, the combined team maintains continuous monitoring while developing response strategies for various scenarios when the countdown reaches zero. The atmosphere is tense but focused, humanity's finest minds confronting a phenomenon beyond their experience or understanding. Sarah finds herself in a unique position, neither scientist nor military strategist, but the person chosen by Foster's elaborate system to steward this discovery. Her environmental compliance background provides unexpected perspective, viewing the situation through the lens of systemic interaction rather than isolated phenomenon. The object doesn't just respond to observation, she notes during a strategy session. It responds differently based on the observer's intent. It escalated when Atlas approached a team motivated by acquisition and control, but maintained stability during Chen's initial scientific assessment. You're suggesting it can sense intention, the Secretary asks skeptically. I'm suggesting its response patterns correlate with approach methodologies. When Harrington's team arrived with military-grade detection equipment, it accelerated its activation. When Atlas approached with acquisition intent, it established a protective perimeter. The pattern indicates sensitivity to context beyond simple observation. The linguistic specialist nods thoughtfully. If we're dealing with sufficiently advanced technology, the distinction between sensing physical approach and interpreting intent might be meaningless. Clarke's third law applies: any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic, which means our approach methodology directly influences outcome. Chen concludes. Aggressive containment might trigger defensive reactions, while scientific curiosity elicits informational response. This insight reshapes their strategy as the countdown approaches its final hours. Military containment assets are repositioned to secondary defensive lines, while scientific personnel establish closer observation posts with minimal equipment footprint. The goal shifts from controlling the object to creating optimal conditions for whatever communication or transition occurs when the countdown reaches zero. As dawn breaks on the final day with just 6 hours remaining, an unexpected visitor arrives at the outer perimeter, a slight elderly man in his late 90s accompanied by a middle-aged woman. They identify themselves as Gerald Foster and his daughter Catherine. The revelation sends shockwaves through the command structure. Foster, the brilliant physicist, who supposedly died in 1953 alive and present at the culmination of his 70-year plan. Security protocols immediately activate with verification procedures established to confirm the man's identity before allowing access. DNA comparison with military records, fingerprint analysis, and cognitive verification, through knowledge of classified Blackwatch protocols, confirm the extraordinary truth: Gerald Foster, now 98 years old, has emerged from 7 decades of anonymity to witness the culmination of his life's work. As Foster is escorted to the command post, his frail physique belying the brilliant mind still evident in his sharp gaze, Sarah feels a profound sense of completion. The architect of the elaborate system that brought her to this moment has arrived to witness its fulfillment. Ms. Lawson, Foster greets her, his voice thin but clear. You've managed the situation admirably, exactly as I hoped when I designed the selection parameters. You're supposed to be dead, Harrington states flatly. Foster's eyes twinkle with surprising humor. I've been told that repeatedly over the years. The hiking accident was convincing enough to create the necessary operational security. Why reveal yourself now after 7 decades? The secretary asks. Because we've reached the critical juncture, the moment in when the Guardian completes its assessment cycle and renders judgment. Judgment. The word sends a chill through the command post. Foster nods slowly. That's its primary function. It was placed here by a civilization far more advanced than our own, programmed to monitor technological development and evaluate whether emerging intelligences represent a threat to galactic stability. A doomsday device, the general asked sharply. No, General, a guidance system. It awakens periodically to assess progress, particularly when civilizations approach technological thresholds with both constructive and destructive potential. Nuclear capability represents one such threshold, the ability to either power a civilization sustainably or destroy it completely. And what happens when it completes its assessment? Sarah asks. So, that depends on us, on what it has observed during this cycle and previous ones, on whether it classifies humanity as a constructive or destructive intelligence. The implications are staggering, not merely an alien artifact or communication device, but an evaluation system determining humanity's classification in some cosmic order. How do you know this? Harrington demands. Because it told me in 1952, Foster replies simply, during its last activation cycle. I was the primary observer then, just as Ms. Lawson is now. It communicates most directly with whoever it identifies as the representative intelligence during each cycle. And you kept this secret for 70 years, the secretary asked incredulously. I documented everything in reports classified above top secret, accessible only to those with Umbra clearance. But the Cold War mentality of that era made proper handling impossible. Both American and Soviet authorities viewed the Guardian as a potential weapon or technological advantage. I staged my death to prevent either side from attempting to seize or destroy it before the next assessment cycle. Foster turns to Sarah. The trust mechanism I created wasn't just about protecting property rights. It was designed to identify someone with the right combination of intelligence, integrity, and compassion to serve as humanity's representative during this critical assessment cycle. Why me? Sarah asked the question that has lingered since she discovered Foster's elaborate system. The selection parameters were precise, seeking someone with scientific understanding, but humanistic values, someone facing personal adversity, but maintaining ethical principles, someone with both the capacity to comprehend the situation and the character to prioritize greater good over personal gain. He smiles gently. Also, you bear a remarkable resemblance to my late wife, Emily, not physically, but in spirit and determination. When I established the trust parameters, I used her qualities as a template for the ideal representative. The personal connection creates a sudden emotional dimension to what had seemed an impersonal selection system. Foster hadn't merely designed a mechanical process for identifying a suitable successor. He had infused it with deeply personal values and memories. What happens now? Sarah asks as the countdown approaches its final hours. You complete what you have already begun. Approach the Guardian with scientific curiosity and ethical purpose. It responds to genuine intent. When the assessment completes, it will either provide humanity with knowledge to advance beyond destructive technologies, or it will return to dormancy until the next cycle, giving us more time to mature as a species. And if it judges us unfavorably, the secretary asks the question everyone is thinking. It doesn't destroy, that would contradict its purpose. It simply withholds assistance, leaving civilizations to either overcome their destructive tendencies independently or succumb to them naturally. As the final hour approaches, the combined scientific and military team prepares for whatever transition occurs when the countdown reaches 0. Foster, despite his age, insists on accompanying Sarah to the observation post nearest the energy dome, positioning them to witness the culmination of a process 70 years in preparation. You've done well, Foster tells her as they watch the shimmering dome now pulsing with increasing frequency. Better than I could have hoped when I designed the system. I still don't understand why you chose this approach. Sarah admits, creating such an elaborate mechanism spanning decades when you could have simply revealed the truth. In 1953, revealing the truth would have led to military seizure of the site and attempted weaponization of the Guardian. Neither American nor Soviet authorities were prepared to approach this responsibly. I needed to create time and space for humanity to mature and to ensure the right person would be present for this critical assessment cycle. Foster looks at her with surprising intensity. The Guardian doesn't just evaluate technological development, Ms. Lawson. It assesses moral and ethical evolution, whether a species can develop powerful technologies while maintaining the wisdom to use them constructively. Your presence here, how you've approached this situation, is as much part of the assessment as our collective nuclear history. As the countdown approaches zero, the energy dome begins to pulse with increasing brightness. The object at its center, now clearly visible as a crystalline spheroid approximately 3 feet in diameter, emits patterns of light that form complex geometric structures in the surrounding field. It's beautiful, Sarah whispers. It is, Foster agrees, a reminder that true advancement unifies scientific precision with aesthetic harmony. In the final minutes, the dome's pulsing synchronizes with global patterns, alignments with nuclear facilities, worldwide connections to power grids, communications networks and military systems, becoming evident in the data streaming to monitoring stations. Not intrusive or controlling, but aware, conscious of humanity's technological nervous system in its entirety. It's conducting its final evaluation, Foster explains, assessing our current state against historical patterns and projected development curves. As the countdown reaches zero, the dome suddenly contracts, energy flowing inward toward the central object in a spiraling pattern of extraordinary beauty and mathematical precision. The light intensifies to brilliant radiance before collapsing entirely into the object itself, which now hovers silently above the remains of the cabin foundation. For several seconds, nothing happens. The assembled observers hold their breath, instruments recording, but unable to interpret the phenomenon before them. Then, with gentle deliberation, the object descends until it rests precisely where Foster's hidden chamber had been. A final pulse of energy expands outward, not destructive, but transformative, restoring the cabin structure around it while leaving the object visible in what was once the hidden chamber, now exposed through a perfectly circular opening in the cabin floor. From the object, a final projection emerges. Not mathematical formulas or technical diagrams, but a simple representation of Earth, surrounded by a field of stars with pathways extending outward to distant systems. Beside this galactic map appears a sequence of symbols that the linguistic team tentatively identifies as a form of writing or code. Its final message, Foster murmurs, the assessment is complete. And the verdict, the secretary asks tensely, provisional acceptance. Foster interprets, studying the projection. We've been classified as an emerging intelligence with significant potential. The Guardian will remain in its current state, accessible for study, but not fully activated until the next assessment cycle, approximately 70 years from now. Not quite the technological windfall some might have hoped for, Harrington observes. But not rejection either, Sarah points out. It's giving us time to develop further while providing limited access to study its properties. A learner's permit rather than a full license. Foster agrees with a small smile. Appropriate for a species still mastering its own technologies. As the immediate crisis resolves, transition to a long-term research operation begins. The Secretary establishes a civilian-led scientific authority to study the Guardian with military elements, repositioned to security rather than containment roles. Atlas Resources is granted limited research access under strict oversight, integrating their historical data with government records to create a comprehensive understanding of the Guardian's previous cycles. For Sarah, the resolution brings both clarity and new beginnings. The property remains legally hers, though now under a special research designation that provides substantial compensation while ensuring proper scientific management of the site. The financial security this creates will fund Emily's education and their future needs beyond anything Sarah could have imagined when she spent her last $1.200 on an abandoned cabin. More personally, Foster's emergence creates an unexpected connection to the past, a living link to the man whose elaborate system had identified her as worthy of this extraordinary responsibility. Despite his advanced age, Foster's mind remains sharp, his perspective on the Guardian's purpose providing essential context for the research program now being established. "What will you do now?" Foster asks as they stand on the cabin porch, watching the scientific teams establish permanent monitoring stations around the property. "Be a mother first," Sarah replies. "Make sure Emily understands what happened here without being overwhelmed by it. Beyond that, help where I can with the research program using my environmental compliance background to ensure responsible management." A worthy approach, Foster approves. The Guardian responds to balance between scientific advancement and ethical wisdom, between technological power and responsible stewardship. "Your perspective will be valuable as the program develops." "And you, after 70 years in hiding, what comes next?" Foster gazes at the mountains, their ancient slopes unchanged despite the extraordinary events of recent days. "Documentation, recording what I've learned and observed across multiple Guardian cycles. And perhaps, if time permits, rebuilding connections with the family I left behind through Catherine and her children." As the sun sets over the Blackwater property, Sarah reflects on the journey that brought her here. What began as a desperate financial gamble has transformed into something profound, not merely scientific discovery or financial security, but participation in humanity's gradual maturation as a species. The cabin that cost her last $1 and $200 now stands as both scientific research site and symbol of cosmic evaluation, a reminder that advancement requires not just technological capability, but ethical wisdom to guide it. Foster's elaborate system, spanning 7 decades and culminating in her selection as humanity's representative, had achieved its purpose, not through mechanical precision alone, but through the deeply personal values he had infused into its design, the template of his beloved Emily, shaping the parameters that ultimately identified Sarah as the right person at the right moment. As stars emerge in the mountain sky, the same stars that host civilizations advanced enough to create and deploy the Guardian, Sarah feels a profound sense of perspective. Human concerns that had seemed overwhelming just weeks ago now appear as steps in a longer journey, parts of a development process being observed and evaluated across cosmic timescales. Emily will arrive tomorrow, her future now secure beyond anything Sarah could have provided before discovering Foster's legacy. The cabin will become their home as intended, though now, with an extraordinary addition beneath its floors, a crystalline reminder that humanity's choices are being observed and assessed as we develop toward either wisdom or self-destruction. The mountain wind carries the scent of pine and possibility, whispering through forests that have witnessed countless Guardian cycles across millennia. Whatever judgment awaits humanity in future assessment cycles will depend on choices made. Now, choices about how we develop and apply the knowledge gained from this extraordinary encounter. Sarah Lawson, who came seeking only affordable housing and financial stability, now stands as witness to humanity's provisional acceptance into a larger cosmic community, a tenuous first step on a path that leads either to greater wisdom or greater folly, depending on choices yet to be made. The Guardian waits patient and eternal for humanity to demonstrate which path we will choose.